Okay, can I grab a link to the stream, please? Hello? Fucking. Okay, there we go. Go. Look at him go! The lover. Okay, there you guys go. I'm just going to listen to what I can hear and see how it sounds. There we go. Uh, because when I when I went onto OBS to sort out things for the stream, for some reason YouTube flipped the chat. So instead of starting at the bottom, it started at the top. So I went and got Sky to help me, and I was like, "Where the fuck is my chat? I've been trying to get it to work for like 10 minutes." And she's like, "No, I can see your chat." I'm like, "Where?" And then she's like, "Well, the positions got switched. Now it's starting at the top instead of at the bottom. So if you want to see your chat, just spam something, and it will show up." So I just spammed H. I like that idea too, especially since I did kind of. Help me. Uh, don't know. Look at him go. The lover. Okay, there you guys go. I'm just going to listen to what I can Uvu and see how it sounds. There we go. Uh, because when I when I went onto OBS to sort out things for the stream, for some reason YouTube splendid. That would have been okay. So in all honesty, I don't know how to fix this. Uh. I would refrain from speaking too much because I'm trying to fix the audio, so I only need like a handful of people to actually speak. Uh, yeah, I don't know what to do. Uvu, help. Why no audio pickup? Oh my god, Jane, please. Output devices don't seem to really want to change. For fuck's sake. Why is this happening? It always happens to me. Properties. Okay. Headphones. Sure. Speak now? Okay, it's not doing that. Uh, now?
Hello, I am speaking times two.
Okay, something green showed up on OBS, so let me listen to the stream.
Nope. Oh no, wait, that was the first time. Fuck. Yeah, it's working. Hooray!
Is it?
All right. Is it working for everybody?
It should.
Oh man.
Not, it would be
Alright.
really weird if it was just working for me.
Yeah, this stream is just you and Shandy going at it. You sound good. I can hear you just fine.
Okay, sure. Thank you.
No
Sorry I'm late, by the way.
background noise, OG.
Is there background noise?
Oh no, not anymore. There
Okay,
was to
cool.
begin with,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
it's all good now.
So it is working.
Yeah.
Sweet. Now that that's all good to go, I need to. Okay, save. Okay, I still hear noise. Lights are going green on OBS, so it should be working. Okay, so now at this point, I think I just need to click go live. Not go live. Go public. There we go.
Go dead.
Okay, so that is now public. So we should be getting people momentarily in the chat. I will also send it to the necessary locations later on because I can't be bugged doing it now on Discord. So we're probably
Wow.
just going to wait around for people to show up. I'm gonna go grab a drink and I'll be right back.
Okay.
Okay.
We've been abandoned already. Good start.
Start stream. Invites
Bye.
everyone. Leaves.
Host just
to
leaves their
elaborate,
own streams.
Well, if Shandy's not gonna be here, I'll introduce what's happening. Hello, everyone. We have Jane, also known as
Hi.
Star Wars Substance,
Hello, everybody.
who we responded to, not on this podcast, but on another long dead one called Uvucast. And the subject was everyone's favorite Star Wars prequels. And
Yay.
Movies.
so we responded to Jane's video, and Jane reached out and said that they wanted to come onto the podcast. And so we're going to have a bit of a general chat about the Star Wars prequels discourse in general, and specifically another person we also responded to in the past on Uvucast, Rick Worley, renowned video
Oh.
essayist Rick Worley.
Oh, he's my
boy.
favorite.
Yeah. So somebody sent me like I think it was like right after you posted it. By the way, I'm not sure, but somebody sent
that's
me
what I
like that
said.
original video. Wait, can you hear me just fine?
Yep,
Yeah,
can
you
hear
Yes.
sound good
yeah,
enough.
yeah. Okay, yeah. So somebody sent me like that video, and I decided to actually sit through it and hear you guys out. And yeah, there's some things I kind of agree with because because I made that video about 2 years ago now, and yeah, as time went on, there's some things that I don't know. I
You don't
think
really
like
agree with, or that you hold to a consistent standard that you have now.
yeah, it's kind of it's also like I feel like part of the problem that I have with that video is in addition to it like being a little bit structurally messy, I think that like I wasn't even like consciously trying to do this so much, but I feel like it almost like just started validating all of these like pretentious nerds. Like and just kind of like people would watch that video and they'd be like, "Oh yes, somebody actually hears me. Somebody is speaking for me." And like these prequels are actually like these amazing pieces of art. And it's like, "Oh, okay, slow down." And then like I start clicking on some of their like their videos and stuff because some of them would post videos and there was like one that literally like defended fascism on like a live stream or something. And I'm like, oh, I can't. So one of the reasons I never did a
What
follow
have
up
I
is
done?
yeah, one
Why
of the
do I
reasons I
feel
never
like
did a
that's a Lily
follow up.
Orchard video? That sounds like something she'd make.
Yeah, there's
No,
just and so people's responses. I mean, people have been like pretty like positive towards the video, and that's cool and all. I think that I made some pretty good points for some of it, but I also think that like once I get into like the character analysis of that video, which takes up a good chunk of it, I feel like my main point kind of gets a little lost in the way. So I kind of do agree with that main criticism. So it was you said there was actually a different podcast that you did that on.
Yeah, so
This is
essentially what this podcast is, it's on my channel. I wanted to start doing some casual content just in the middle, between my bigger videos. The podcast where we responded to you initially is on Uvu's channel, who's on my right
okay.
with the little Santa hat on. That's him. That's where we responded to your video initially. And for those of you in the chat who are not currently here but will show up hopefully sometime soon, the general consensus that we all had was that the video made by Jane was better than most of the other prequel content that we covered, but we still had quite a few grievances with it, and we listed them there. Unfortunately, a lot of us at that point were really sick and tired of prequels. So we might
Yeah.
not have been the most polite people, but
Yeah.
Oh.
I think another thing needs to be addressed as well. Sorry, before we start. Because we'd covered so much prequel content and had so many different arguments thrown our way, and a lot of the same ones as well. Our criticism may have been a little bit like offhanded because the first time we encounter it, like an anomaly in video or something like that, we
Is
list
it
out
not-
all of the reasons and all of the things and then by the time we've heard it like the fourth time, we're like, yeah, we've dealt with this argument. We kind of skip over
Is
some of the finer
is
details.
Anomaly the sunglasses emoji?
Yes,
guy?
he is the
Yes.
that,
Freak.
that creature.
Oh,
We actually
okay.
covered on this podcast as well, and was a
He
whole
is
Oh,
indeed
okay.
a freak, also known as an Australian. So feel free
I-
to
Oi,
crap him out
like,
as
if you're-
much as
Listen here,
possible.
you little squirrel
if
shit.
you're
I
feeling
believe
like I was gonna say,
sorry, I
if you're
believe
feeling like
Anomaly-
your video was poorly structured, don't worry. Do not worry at all. It's nothing compared to what that creature
Yes,
can
because
create.
the thing is that after we covered you the first time, you actually reached out to Uvu and he made us aware of some of the things that you brought up. And I think what happened was because we didn't manage to finish your video in the first stream, we actually had to split it up into two
Yeah, it was a
different parts.
two-parter.
It was also the second part also came out like a wee while later because there was a little bit of a break, and then we ended up covering an AOT video, and then we got back into yours. So I think because we were aware that you were watching it, and you ended up being a much nicer person to talk to than we might have thought, because of our previous experiences dealing with people like Anomaly Inc. and his fan base, and just the sheer utter frustration that is the Rick Worley fan base. We were a lot
Oh,
nicer to you the second time
yeah.
around because we knew that you weren't actually a horrible piece of shit. Um,
Oh no, I try to be nice. I just wanted to make a video about the prequels.
yeah, I know.
Yeah,
It's
then
just unfortunately, this is definitely a fault for us, but it was a sort of guilt by association thing that we had with you, just because of the sheer amount of content that we covered from the prequels beforehand. And I actually
Oh
think
no,
your video
I
was recommended to us by someone who was like, "Oh, Rick Worley's kind of bad, but you should watch this one instead." And his video was
is that
recommended to us initially as, "Oh, you think this one's bad? Well, you should watch Rick Worley's video. He'll definitely do the good job." So it was kind of draining by that part.
It's funny you mentioned about the whole validating pretentious people thing because I notice that, at least in regards to how we ended up getting recommended your video, was that it was a lot of the same people who are like fans of Rick Worley and just that general crowd that like the prequels are secretly genius crowd.
Yeah, and that's kind of the thing when I started noticing because back in 2020 he was nice. Rick was nice enough to invite me on his a live stream where he interviewed somebody that like worked under George Lucas. Um, and I kind of like plugged my the video I was planning at that time there, and I kind of like inherited some of his fans without me knowing how reactionary and kind of like out there they
boy.
are, and that was kind of a little bit of a lapse of judgment on my part. But I mean, like it's and in fairness, a lot of these people have been pretty nice to me. But I've kind of seen them and their kind of like friends interact with other people, and I'm not really that like I don't really think that positively about it. And
It's always the telling thing.
I think you
is, like,
mentioned
how
to
they
me.
react to opposition as opposed to the people they agree with.
mhm.
I think you mentioned to me when we were talking to each other in Discord DMs that you were on friendly basis with some of the people who were fans of this content and who were like part of the prequels defenses. But then when you listed your own grievances with the movies, that you're like, oh, I think this could have done a little bit better, or that this isn't really good, or this interpretation isn't that great, you kind of got a lot of negative feedback from those people, and they kind of wanted to stop associating with you. You can always just feel free to correct me, but as far as I can recall, that's what you said to me at one point. I'm not sure who it was from, but that's the sentiment that I got.
I can't remember, but there's definitely been some people that were like really friendly towards me just because like I was working on and then I made a video defending the prequels, but then like as soon as like I like voiced any kind of criticism, they suddenly feel betrayed, and
Wow, what
or
a fair and open sphere of the
I was about
internet
to
to
say,
be
we
on.
actually have personal experience with that because both
Yeah.
Kamui and Uvu were in Anomaly's server and they were interacting with people until they mentioned the fact that they were covering Anomalies videos
Oh, I
on the
wasn't.
prequels.
I
Yeah,
wasn't involved with that, but I do not think about
so
joining.
I
Yeah, I'll let
can
Kamui
yeah
explain.
I can explain the story. So I was on Anomaly server, and then somebody else in the server, it wasn't me, brought up the podcast that we did, and I saw it, and I just said thanks for enjoying our stream. I'm glad you liked it. And then later on that day, I came back to find I was kicked. No warning, no mention. I was just removed from the server completely.
Oh, really?
Just for covering Anomaly.
We down the line,
Uh,
we eventually got a passive aggressive response from Anomaly on one of his podcasts.
Yes.
In
Well,
reaction to our
not so
content,
much
but
passive
he didn't.
aggressive,
It
but
was
more
so
so
indirect that he didn't even like name the podcast
No,
or
no, no,
anything
no.
like
That's
that.
not what happened. He actually outright called us liars on stream. And I remember this because Uvu shared the link to the stream with me, and I ended up watching that part of it. We were mentioned by name, not by him, but by the person in chat that we were covering him. And when he found out that we were covering his response to Cosmonaut's video on the prequels, he thought that we were automatically taking Cosmonaut's side, and then he delegated us to just being flat out liars, even though he
Wait.
didn't know what the argument was.
Right. Okay. So if I get this straight, basically, so he made a video responding to some guy named Cosmonaut, right?
Mhm.
Yes, that is the
And
person you
you
accused
made a video
Kamui of sounding
respond.
like.
So he can respond to Cosmonaut, but you can't respond to him. Is that right?
Pretty
Apparently.
much, yes.
Well, yeah,
He
because we're
pretended to not have
automatically.
even like watched our video.
Well,
and
that's
he's
the thing is
"Oh,
like he said we
Uvucast, what's
automatically
that?"
agree with every one of his
But
points.
From the way
and
he
aren't gonna
like
add any comment in.
immediately dismissed us, it seems like he had actually seen some of it. Otherwise, he is literally just putting us in the camp of prequel haters just because we responded to his video, which is kind of funny.
I don't really know a whole lot about him personally, but he did interact with me before. He commented on like of course, my prequel video.
Mhm.
But then I saw some of the things he was sharing. I'm like, oh, okay. And I clicked on like one video and kind of skimmed through it, and he was like calling like I don't know, Kathleen Kennedy like this, kind of like misogynistic things or something. I'm like, oh, okay.
Oh, have you seen the edited video that he made of him and George Lucas beating up Kathleen Kennedy, but it's like from some like film clip, but he superimposed his face and George
But
Lucas's face.
Lucas is like friends with her, isn't he?
Yeah, they've worked
I
together
think
for
I think so.
many
Didn't-
projects.
okay,
Indiana Jones
didn't-
being a notable example.
Didn't he threaten like the the makers of Disney Star Wars at the end of his first Revenge of the Prequels video?
Probably. He threatens a lot of people, honestly.
Well,
Yeah,
He
he
wants
we
his
threatens
ways
recently...
YouTube stuff.
demonetized.
He threatens Disney stuff. He threatens other people.
So, Jane, we recently covered... So, for the first 3 episodes of this new podcast, we actually covered Anomaly Inc., claiming that the first Raimi Spider-Man movie was a masterpiece. And in the introduction to that video, he was ranting and raving about the fact that his video got demonetized. And in an attempt to make sure that the newer version of the video wasn't demonetized, he directly called out the YouTube staff as pencil-pushing nerds who were falsely and unfairly going against him just because he is... What was the excuse that he gave? That he was just...
They think that they're personally against him, and he's not even like that big of a channel. So I have absolutely no idea where he's getting that impression from.
Neither do I.
Well, I mean, I have some videos that are demonetized. Sometimes I think it's fair, sometimes I don't think it's fair. But usually I can kind of pinpoint like a reason for it, at the very least.
I would have to,
I think I can pinpoint the reason for Anomaly.
I feel like-
yeah, I would have to
Yeah,
assume it's the movie footage.
Well, it also can be like if you're like kind of like calling people names and stuff, and
Oh,
you're kind
yeah.
of like inciting like bullying or
Which he
threatening
does a
people,
lot.
as you say. Yeah, I mean, I think that it's a fair game for.
And it was still pretty bad.
Oh, really? Jeez.
Before we continue, I just wanted to do something here real quick. So people who watch the stream might not necessarily be familiar with Uvucast, so they don't know who the 2 other people in the call are. Most of you are probably already familiar with me. It's my channel, you subscribe, so you'll be fucking stupid if you don't know who I am. You guys
Who
are
the hell
probably
are you?
already familiar with Darth, he's the cowboy on the far left. You guys are probably familiar
Hello.
with Uvu,
Oh,
although he's
that
changed his
is-
PSP since the last one. He's now got a Christmas hat on.
Hi.
On the furthest end, that's Jane, also known as Star Wars Substance, who is our
Furthest to the
guest
left,
today.
we should clarify.
Yeah, furthest to the left.
Yeah.
The one between me and Darth, that is Kamui. He is a former co-host of the Uvucast podcast, and he is one of the people who helped cover Jane's initial video. And on the far right is Whirvos, another...
Yeah, Huevos on the far right. Sounds about right.
No.
He is also another former co-host of the Uvucast podcast, and he was also present when we covered Jane. So the idea was that we all just come back together to talk this out with Jane, because we were initially supposed to do this on Uvu's podcast, but that never ended up happening. So here we are doing it now instead.
Here we are going far.
As Darth has already mentioned, while also being on the far right, Whirvos is our far right host. So if you have any vitriol towards people
Stop!
of that,
Not true.
All
Why'd
two
you
of our
introduce
viewers
us in
are gonna
that
come
order?
after you
That is so
now.
strange.
yeah, but yeah, that's all I
Scatterbrain's
wanted
the
to.
podcast,
That's all I
honestly.
wanted to clear up. Just who
I
everyone
am.
was.
Yeah, I am most likely gonna mix some of you all up.
It's fine. We're
so
interchangeable at this point.
so who here was the meanest to me on the
that-
original
wait.
That
podcast?
would actually
I
probably
probably,
be me, to be
probably
honest.
guess it'd be.
Oh,
yeah,
really?
it might have been
I
Shady, it might have
don't-
been me.
Listen, I get how like internet kind of response videos go. I don't take anything personally.
Yeah, like I'm probably generally the most mean, or I was the most mean on our podcast.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure
Mainly,
Kamui was just.
Oh, it's fine. Hey, it's
destroying.
fine. It's fine. It's fine.
It
I
is
was-
an
It's
interesting
fine.
little psychological thing, though, isn't it? When you're just like sitting down with friends, you almost end up like dehumanizing the person you're responding to.
Well,
It's
that's
very easy
actually
to
not
just get
something
caught
that I would
into the
agree
group
with, because
mentality.
the first two episodes where we covered Anomaly after like a few month-long break, we weren't actually too mean to him. I think what happened when we were covering Jane initially is that we were just doing this for too long without much of a break in between, and it was
Yeah.
just the same sort of
Part
arguments
of
we
why the
were hearing.
podcast fell apart because we're
Yeah,
like, oh my god, why are we
we-
doing this for 10 hours every weekend? Jesus Christ.
I think what that was attributed to was, yeah, sure. I mean, I'm willing to take the flak for being mean. I'll still stand by some of the stuff that I said because, yes, I refuse to take back opinions that I may no longer hold. That's just me. But a lot of that can just be attributed to we were just doing it for far too long. We weren't covering topics that were necessarily fresh, and just general annoyance at each other for just being on this podcast for so damn long.
Oh
So-
yeah.
Now it's been a bit of a hiatus. We weren't as mean to Anomaly as we were when we've covered him initially, but then 3 weeks later, we covered him for the last time, and we were just going at it because we just could not stand him any longer.
I think I was the meanest this time. There was a complete role reversal. I was just so done with Anomaly shit by the end of that video.
Pretty much.
Is he still actively a YouTuber?
Yeah,
Oh yeah, he's even more
Okay.
active than normal recently.
Oh, okay.
He's
Yeah.
discovered a new key to success. He will re-upload the same video with 2 minutes added on or 2 minutes missing, while the original video is still up, and he'll do that just to get past the copyright or the demonetization thing. So if you go onto his channel right now, you can actually see 3 different versions of a video where he talks about Reva from the Kenobi TV show.
Oh,
And
God.
he didn't remove any of them. He just kept them all up. They're all there. You can.
Pretty sure that's against YouTube's terms of service as well. Uploading duplicate videos.
I would not.
Well, I don't know. I think it depends. I think if you're spamming the same video over and over again, that can kind of be like considered
Yeah,
a
it's
problem.
probably a matter of degree in terms of what gets YouTube's
Yeah.
attention.
Like I've had like some videos.
Wait,
of
how does
mine,
BTS still
which,
have a YouTube channel then?
Don't know.
Because they
I'm not
bring
sure.
in the big bucks.
Look, I
um,
get the joke. It's funny.
Sorry, Jane.
Thank
So
you,
I was-
Kamui.
Oh, I didn't.
what was it? Oh, I was saying that like okay, so like I guess a little bit of context for my channel for those who don't know. Star Wars is kind of more like, dare I say, an anomaly for my channel.
You'll fit right in.
Most
Stop
of
making that pun.
most of the I mean like I cover like kind of pop culture stuff every once in a while. I'm not like against it, but I also kind of like talk about more like world cinema and like sometimes experimental films too.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So when I made my Star Wars video was a bit like kind of just was just like kind of like more like an outlier in what I was making. But I guess like what I was saying about like the whole like duplicate video thing, like sometimes I get like videos that have like a copyright claim or something, and then I just like edit it down a little bit and then re-upload it, and usually it's fine. So like I don't think YouTube's really been like too picky about like
But
duplicate
is
videos,
the
but
no, Jane, hold on. Is the initial video that got copyright claimed still up alongside the re-edited one? or is it just the reality one?
Usually it's still up, but I unlist it. If that makes sense.
Okay, no,
Okay.
that's
Like,
still leagues different. It normally has 3 versions of the
Okay.
same video public.
Yeah, you can watch them all if you want. You can watch the whole
confusing.
Yeah,
trilogy.
You can open up 3 separate
whole
tabs, put
trilogy.
on each video in each separate tab, and have them playing out at once. That's how he operates. They aren't unlisted. They aren't
Director's
private.
cuts.
They're there. They're all.
Just
I
so
And
would.
I was gonna say,
honestly.
Jane, to get back to the point. That was one of the things that caught me off guard when I first got recommended your video. Is I clicked on your channel and I saw quite a few things that I actually would want to watch and learn about. So I was like, oh, cool. This is like this is actually a channel. And I still haven't got around to watching any of your content, unfortunately, because I've just been busy
Okay.
with real life stuff and kind of forgot about this actually happening until like last week.
Oh,
Um,
I actually like I was like talking about maybe like joining the podcast on I guess it was Uvucast at that point. And then like I got like a girlfriend the next week and I just totally forgot about it for a few months. So
Yeah, I
okay.
don't think we ever came back after that point. So I don't.
I mean,
think
I
we-
think it's
Oh,
I think it's
did I
mutual.
ruin it? Did
No,
I
no,
ruin
no,
it?
no,
It was
we-
on
we
Uvucast?
came back-
It was
I think
actually,
it was
no,
on the
we did-
decline for a while, to be honest. But
Yeah,
still.
I think we did the Multiverse of Madness
The
one. for
Multiverse of
that,
Madness
and
was
then-
the last one.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that was
Yeah.
the last one we did.
We did do a Halo stream, but I delisted it because it sucked, and it was just me yelling at Darth. I think.
I don't
Isn't
even
that-
remember this.
Isn't that like every episode though? Also, just realized introverted robot and Alan are now in the chat. Hello, lads. Nice to see
Man,
you.
they've been here for
ages. You just been ignoring.
No, I've just been busy looking up other stuff. I
I'm
didn't even
joking.
read the chat. But
I'm joking. Yeah, I was reading through the. Hey, it's nice to see you guys.
I'm just going to copy this link, but I've just shared something in the chat that we're currently in. That is basically a snippet of what I was talking about, where anomalies videos just get remade, like they aren't unlisted or they aren't privated. They just almost pound for pound the exact same thing, and I'm put it on
Oh,
the screen
wow.
now for the chat to see.
It's so
Yeah, I saw
bizarre.
another one where he had his video of the Batman, and then another one where it's the demonetized version as well.
MCU?
Oh my god, I love the thumbnail that is just women aren't the problem, it's how they're depicted is just on so many levels. What the fuck?
MCU.
Women aren't the problem. Wait, what?
They kind of
Huh?
MCU one, then
Who's
the
arguing
MCU
that
phase
women were the
4.
problem?
I know that's such a self-report.
Is MCU a thing? Like, is that just
Yeah, it
It's a
is.
thing that people say. It's
I have
very
heard it
And
being
a lot of
said.
losers use that term.
Well, because there's like, because it's like what, like emasculating
just
like
woke?
men or something.
Well, it's
Yeah,
like
okay.
woke, you know. You
Yeah,
got
that's what the
Shuri as
M
Black
stands for,
Panther, and you got
emasculation.
Miss Marvel, and you got that shot in Endgame that well, not everyone, but that people on that side of the internet got mad at
Mm-hmm.
because it had women.
She-Hulk, I guess.
Where did
Although
my
4
one-
months ago, that
She-Hulk.
was before She-Hulk.
I mean,
Yeah, She-Hulk. Have you seen
Hey.
She-Hulk, Jane? It's a masterpiece.
I have not seen. I have not caught up with Marvel really.
Good.
Days.
don't.
I'm
Save
tempted
your
to
time.
just ignore
You're-
all Marvel going forward at this
you're-
point. I'm just so
Save
sick
your
of the
time.
fucking franchise.
You're not making a mistake by ignoring Marvel.
Yeah,
You're
I
not-
haven't.
You're not
I don't
missing
know,
out on anything special.
I honestly don't really care for any of the MCU films, so I've never really been that compelled to like watch all of them, I guess.
Yeah.
So
And it's annoying in this current phase where they're requiring you to consume TV series or past movies in order to make sense of
Yeah,
current
you have to get the
movies. It's even
fucking
more
battle
off-putting.
pass with Disney
Wait,
Plus. It's bullshit.
wait, sorry, what Darth said wasn't accurate. Even if you watch the TV shows, you will not make sense of what's happening.
Yeah,
Yeah, if
that's
anything, it might
true.
actually make it worse.
Because
Depending on
they
the-
kind of went from a whole like, structure of like, oh, everything's connected. It's like a continuous story that's being told, and now it feels like everything's super disconnected from each other and
It
doesn't
certainly
really
feels like
align.
everything's in its own pocket dimension.
So
Yeah.
for those of you in chat, you'll basically see what I was talking about. We might have mentioned this in a other stream, but as you can see, he's got 2 versions of 2 different videos up at the same time for some reason, I guess.
I mean,
Do you want to put
I
it
don't
up
think-
on the stream?
I was gonna
I
say I
did-
don't
I
think the
did.
stream can see it.
I did just
Oh,
give it
Oh,
a
there we go.
Oh, yep, I
can
see
see
it
it.
now.
Mhm.
Sweet.
yeah.
Yep.
wait,
So
so he has like demonetized version and monetized version. Okay.
yeah, I think that's the thing that he's going for, where he just keeps both versions up, but one of them is the one that
Like
is actually
Renegade
going
and
to make him money.
Paragon.
But yeah, that is his thing. he does that.
Wait, I just realized as well. In the bottom right is like a decline of the MCU and why I'm done with it, and in the video right after is like I'm done with the MCU. It's like, oh, I guess we're done again.
I'm done for real this time, I promise.
And then he makes another MCU movie.
And then he looks at the
Video.
view count of his video and he's like, oh,
Yeah.
maybe I'm not done with it.
Maybe I'll
Maybe
just
I'm
make
not.
one more video.
Yeah. Well,
He's
scroll
quite
through
a
his channel,
silly
doesn't he? Doesn't he like the Spider-Man movie? I don't even. He seems all over the place. I don't know. I don't really have
very
any like
unorganized
personal
channel.
grievance with him or anything.
Yeah.
But okay. But I guess like so we're gathered here to discuss my video. Refresh my memory.
Prequels in
What's your
general.
yeah, or just that. What was like your main issue with like the video that would you say like with hindsight?
Honestly, probably what you said. It was just very unstructured, and yeah, the character analysis section was the weakest. Seems like we're pretty much in agreement of how the video could have been improved. When
Okay,
it comes to
cool.
granularity of the actual like arguments with the prequels, I imagine that'll probably just come up when we're discussing the prequels.
Yeah. I'm kind of like looking at my comments and it's like, I don't know. I'm kind of like I actually like recently watched like all the Star Wars films with my girlfriend.
Yeah, I do recall you mentioning that.
Yeah, but like I'm really Star Wars out, I guess. I am like working on something on my channel, but it's like but the reason why I'm doing that is because like I kind of just want a more casual video on Star Wars because the main issue that I had with the video that I put out is that I just didn't really have that much fun making it. It just sucked up so much of my time and like energy. And at the end of the day, so I think so when Rick Worley posted his video, or at least when I found it, I kind of at that point in time I kind of wanted to like make some of those same arguments and stuff. Um, but then I found his video and I'm like, oh, okay, so somebody else is making that. Cool. I can kind of just make mine a little more focused. The thing is, he ended up getting into contact with me because we were talking about like copyright or something with videos, and we started talking, and then he heard that I was making a video, and then he was giving me some feedback and blah blah blah.
Good.
And I think at the end of the day, I think that the quality of that video, I don't plan to ever talk to the guy again, so I don't like care. I think the quality of the video kind of started suffering because of his influence.
That's so funny.
That's
Rick
amazing but
Worley's
sad at the same
influence.
time.
Oh my god.
No,
He's corrupted.
and then but then when I started realizing, so basically in 2020 we talked quite a bit. That's a whole big story. But
Yeah, I remember you saying.
yeah, I'm not gonna. Yeah, but
That's okay.
so we started talking like a bit, and then basically I thought he was just so pretentious that I stopped talking to him for like a year, and then we started talking again, and then I ended up blocking him. So I really have no plans to talk to him again. But the thing is, we stopped talking the first time, like right before I was released my video, and then I realized before it was too like oh no, I didn't even like realize this, but I'm somewhat influenced by him, so I try to course correct it in my video and try to like kind of salvage it. But I think like because like 'cause there's that moment at the end where I talk about how like you can't really just make a proclamation of like these films being like high art or whatever, because like what does that even mean? And I think at the end of the day that is more or less what Rick is kind of hinting at, that these are like high art, and that you are inferior for not recognizing that.
Art's so
And then-
high above the consumer that they're
Yes,
criticism.
well, yeah, but I was a little bit blinded at first when I saw the video, because I just thought like, oh, okay, so somebody's trying to approach this and kind of connect it to other films, and I found that pretty interesting. Even then, I had a few issues with it, but
Some
yeah.
of them are quite a bit of a reach. Good God.
yeah, but then it's kind of like
Circles.
yeah, but then at the end of the day, I think like well, I mean, I think that's sort of interesting, some of like his like visual style, and I think it's interesting how he like references these different films to kind of create something new out of it. But at the end of the day, I don't think that his video really makes a good case for why this means that they're good.
Yes.
Yeah,
That was the
yes,
main
that
issue.
that was our issue with the
He
video. as
front
well.
loaded all of his evidence and then provided no
We kept
conclusion.
waiting
We
for
were
the
like,
thesis.
Yeah,
That's
he
kind
shows
of his
comparisons, but that's it.
That's kind of his problem with the Woody Allen video, also. Which, I mean, like, given how stubborn the guy is, like, whether the guy is like innocent or not, I think that it coming from him is like the last person I would trust as like an authority of that. And then, of course, he made a whole J.K. Rowling video, which I could go on about, but I probably won't because I just.
That sounds
I just
so
I-
spicy.
I saw
I
that
wrote
one.
I wrote a comment on that video just because I felt like I should because I was on his channel before.
I
So-
didn't watch that video, but I had a laugh when I saw it because he made it after we'd already had that initial chat about him. So I had found
yeah.
it amusing that he would make that video.
Oh yeah, he made that video, but also like in preparation for making that Rowling video, he would like. I mean, I don't want to like get too much into detail about like our private messages just for the sake of privacy, but like he would message me about like just like, oh hey, do you agree with this like vaguely transphobic take? Do you agree with this? Do you agree with that? Just trying to push my buttons or just trying to test like, oh, what's the proper level of bigotry until like it becomes too far. It's like, dude, just leave me alone. No, yeah, that's what I thought. I
Sorry.
several times. Just stop
That's
asking me
a
this.
very odd thing to say because fucking hell,
Oh.
I mean, like, there are going to be there are varying levels of like tolerance for that kind of thing from trans people. Like, if you show one person a J.K. Rowling quote, they'll be like, "Oh, yeah, no, I don't really care." And then you show another person, and like, "Okay, I'm not gonna go and credit card risk myself now." Bye.
Oh yeah, but then also like part of it's like
Piece of shit.
it's like I just would like why is it that once I become a girl, people are asking me about sports and you know what I mean? Like,
That's a new one.
yeah, well, you know, like the whole like kind of like athletes and stuff. Like
Oh,
dude,
yeah.
why are you asking me this?
Oh, right.
Like,
I
yeah,
think there's
like-
this weird thing on the left in particular where they're afraid to kind of have an opinion on it without having the support of someone who's affected by the topic, which I think I kind of understand in theory, but it also leads to some really weird like fetishism as well.
Well, yeah, that's what it ultimately felt like. It felt like he was just trying to like because like he would send me some like cringe thing from some like you know like some like kid that's on TikTok, and I'm like, yeah, I guess
Oh,
that kid is
God.
cringe. I agree that kids can be cringe. What are you trying to prove? And I don't know. I think that video is like somehow even worse than like the
Yeah.
previous ones.
Sorry,
Like
Okay.
the red
I
flags were
was-
there though.
I wasn't aware of the video, so I looked at his channel and just saw that what if J.K. Rowling
Yeah, I
is
just
right
looked
about
at
everything?
What a
Oh, no.
fucking
Well, yeah,
terrible-
What if?
between, like, between Star Wars, Woody Allen,
ominous
and,
title.
so between Star Wars, Woody Allen, and J.K. Rowling, or I guess like Lucas for Star Wars, like what it comes down to is his main argument is this: you people, you inferior people that type on the keyboards on Twitter and so on don't know what you're talking about, but I do know what I'm talking about, and I am right, so I'm just gonna say I'm right over and over and over again.
Yeah,
He
it sounds like
doesn't
Rick
use a
Worley.
keyboard. He uses a typewriter. He is beyond your
Yeah,
comprehension.
it's
because it's a reference to a film from the
oh my
1920s.
goodness.
It's kind of similar to
With the character who goes against society,
Also
uses a
called
typewriter.
Rick.
yeah, it's similar to
Yeah.
what a lot of Anomaly's arguments were for the prequels not having issues, which tended to rely on George Lucas being infallible.
Wait, they don't have any issues?
Yeah, Anomaly does
What
this
does that
weird
mean?
thing where he will
What does that mean?
bend over
Anomaly-
backwards to defend literally anything. in the
Anomaly
prequels.
will
he
say
cannot
some-
take
So,
a
Jane-
single L. He will die on every hill. To
Jane-
the point that he's getting to the level where he's like, no, you see, the romance dialogue is like that because they're actually speaking a different language, like Elvish
I
in Lord
wouldn't-
of the Rings.
No,
I
no, no,
think
no.
one
Didn't he
could
say
make-
that it's supposed to be reflective of like some sort of Shakespearean dialogue? Isn't that what he
I
said?
think
He
it was,
said, like,
it was
four
both.
different
Well,
things about
directly
it.
compared to
Both,
Elvish
yeah.
and Lord of the Rings, which is like
He said
I
like
think-
four things on it. Yes.
Well, even if you say something, I don't know about like Elvish or whatever. I haven't seen Lord of the Rings in a long time, but I know that like I guess like one of the argument that I heard is that basically like that kind of dialogue is like calling back to like 50s melodrama and stuff, and like sure, but
Casablanca.
but it's kind of like is it really like that representative of it? Is it really that like
No.
well put
And
together?
that's the problem.
Well, the
It's
conclusion
And-
that
yeah,
we
yeah.
came
saw what
to
Lucas was going for, got so obsessed with what he was going for as opposed to what he actually achieved.
I think a conclusion
Well,
that
I
we
mean-
also came to when we were discussing that is, even if that was the intention, was it done right or was it done well? And we were all like, no, even if that was the intention, it's still fucking terrible because the dialogue is just so piss poorly delivered that you can't
Yeah,
really...
you also have to ask yourself the question, why? How does this improve the movie?
Yeah.
How does this help achieve your goals?
Well, that's the thing, and I think that some of these prequel apologists, that they basically want to make a case that there is no problems with it, and
Yeah.
anybody that's even trying to apply any kind of critical like reading of these is like not really doing anything to. It's not really. It's just gonna be infallible because like at the end of the day, you don't know more about movies than George Lucas.
Well, I
Yeah,
mean,
a
if
lot
you
of it. A
surround-
lot of it does rely on George Lucas being untouchable, which I have
Which
an
is
issue
so
with. I don't think
funny
the
when
writers
this is
are
a man that has
untouchable.
contradicted himself constantly.
If you
Yeah,
sur-
and
Well, yeah, didn't he call the Gungans like Gungas or something?
yeah, he called the Gungans
I mean,
Gungas
that part's
in a
fine
video.
because I imagine they probably work.
Yeah, I don't think that's what they're referring to you as.
Oh,
Like,
I
he
don't know.
contradicted him. He contradicted himself. He called them the wrong
I
thing.
may have gone a
And
little
yeah, there are
too far here for your places.
yeah,
I mean,
that clip is
this
definitely.
is
I
a
think the problem is that
criticism-
Lucas is kind of obsessed with auteur theory himself. So he encourages people to kind of hold him on that pedestal because he is prone to revisionism in regards to how the movies were made and whether they were like planned out all in advance.
Hello,
in
7th
accordance with
edition of the
vision.
special editions for this original trilogy. Welcome, good friend.
So when it comes to like auteur theory, that was another thing. It's like, I mean, like a case of like Rick, and I'm sure other people too. It's like this huge like allegiance to auteur theory, and yes, you can use that kind of as like a critical theory to kind of like judge a work or kind of like understand a work better,
Yeah.
analyze a work. But at the same time, it's not a mark of quality. Like as long as somebody has like a signature style that they kind of like convey in their films, like they're still an auteur, like it or not. I mean, like. It doesn't even matter like what you think of like the director himself.
Yeah, like Neil Breen.
Yeah.
Yeah. You could even say that with Neil Breen or
Yeah,
Tommy
exactly.
Wiseau probably. And so like I find it's very strange. Like I don't have any idea like what you guys think of like Zack Snyder, but like I only bring him up because like in Rick's video he brought him up in passing, kind of like just to dismiss him. But it's like, okay, but how can you really make a strong case against the Save Martha line versus like I don't like sand line? Like,
Yeah,
agree. It seems like it's a little bit of a double standard because like you're just assuming that
Oh no, it
everybody's going to go along
absolutely
with
is
you.
a double standard
Yeah.
because say what you want about Zack Snyder, but he has a very authentic style about his films. Like if you had to take one of his films and compare it to like a Marvel movie, you can very clearly tell which one is the Zack Snyder movie and which one is the
Mhm.
Marvel movie, besides the fact that, you know, one's a Iron Man movie and one's a Superman movie. But irrespective. But like yeah, if you wanted to say something along the lines of George Lucas is infallible because he's an auteur and his films are very centric around that kind of mentality, you have to appeal to that same sort of mindset when it comes to Zack Snyder's movies because he takes a lot of inspiration from other. In this case, for the DC movies, he takes inspiration from Frank Miller's The Dark Knight comic books. He takes
Yeah.
inspiration from Doomsday and Superman comic books. He takes inspirations from his
Various,
own films.
Yeah, various
yeah,
religious imagery as well.
Oh,
Yes.
yeah, pretty much.
and so if you're gonna like kind of like discredit this director in passing, the question is, are you really at the end of the day doing anything different than what like kind of like red letter media and like other people were doing when they were just kind of supposedly just dismissing like George Lucas? Like, are you really doing anything different? Because like you can like analyze any work by whatever criteria you're applying to it, right? So why is it that one thing is like obviously his argument, because he voiced this argument to me, like the argument is like, oh, it's obvious that like that it speaks for itself, like what's
Oh,
better.
God,
It's like,
fucking
that doesn't
hate
make
that
any
argument.
sense. It doesn't make any
Self-evidence, yeah.
sense.
So lazy. It's
She-Hulk
so
is
lazy. It's
an
just
amazing
projection
piece
your
of
own values
content,
onto
and
other
the only
people.
reason why I know that's an amazing piece of content is because it speaks for itself. You're moving,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I remember one time I tried to like gauge with him about like, okay, so because he said in his video, the proper way to judge like a movie is to assess like whether how well it succeeds at achieving the artist's goals, which is not consistently kind of applied in his own like reading of things that he doesn't like. So really, what it comes down to is he loves Star Wars. He loves Star Wars so much, and therefore he has to find a reason why this is the most important thing on Earth and why this is high art. And then I just try to talk about like, yeah, but like it's literally what sparked all the commercialism that you hate in the Marvel movies. Like, and like he's just like, well, it's different because he was trying to like he uses those to fund like his next like come on, the Star Wars like it took the Star Wars holiday special. It took a year and a half before Star Wars was doomed. It took a year and a half because that holiday special was released, right? And that just shows that like we're like kind of like it is just a matter of kind of like you saw the commercial benefit by it, like how well like toys sold. Yes, the original Star Wars was kind of like a surprise success, but they try to capitalize off of that pretty early on, and he even shows, and this is the thing, this is what I really hate. He almost like uses like Mott and Bailey arguments because like
Yeah.
because like he'll be like, oh, this is like high art, and then he'll retreat like it's just for kids, you know, and then he'll just retreat back, like it's high art, and it's like okay, and yes, I guess like you'd probably say that. Well, you can look at like classic literature that's made for children and say that oh, this can be high art too, which just for the record, I don't really buy into the distinction of high art. They're all like
Yeah, I'm
collective,
not really a fan of that.
yeah, but even if you just suppose that there is some kind of like objective like order to quality or whatever, I don't know how on earth we would measure that accurately. But even if we were to suppose that, it's like, uh, um, I feel like that argument just starts defeating itself because of like he's even like using like oh well is this for kids because like underoos or whatever, and it's like okay, so what do you really like where do you really draw the line, because like how is that much different than kind of like the way that like the Marvel films are commercial, because yes, even if you think that there is like a difference, because I think like ultimately I do think that there's a bit more kind of passion behind them and behind the productions, but the question is like how do you really quantify that, because you're not quantifying that in your video, and that's kind of the problem. And I think like in some ways I could see like maybe my video also is always somewhat complicit too in that kind of like dialogue, and so people kept asking me like oh can you make a part two? Can you make a part two? Can you make a part two? And it's like to me, I'm just thinking like I'd rather just redo the first part because I just have like I don't know,
Yeah,
um,
gotcha.
just because, and actually like believe it or not, like I guess Uvucast wasn't even like the only podcast to respond to me, because there was this one video or it's one podcast I listened to where they were responding to kind of like Red Letter Media and like kind of like the defenders and like kind of the detractors of the prequels, and I was brought up, and I you know I kind of agreed with some of their points, because like at the end of the day, like I feel like those videos, like whether it be like Rick's video or my video, a lot of the audience that actually cares about it, that really get engaged with it, are just trying to validate their own um pre-existing kind of biases and opinions, and yes, well, and yes, I understand like people kind of seek out kind of validation to some extent, but it's such a toxic degree, because like I mean like I feel like because people would be like oh so somebody really like Star Wars movies, and then they can have like just like garbage like political like I mean like for example Rick Worley made that Rolling video, and you get Star Wars fans that will like just like kind of like suddenly they just start to all pretend to like Woody Allen because even though they never really watched him, then they just start to defend like Rolling, and I noticed this because I noticed some of like his audience, because I saw some of them in my own audience, and basically I just kind of like don't really like that kind of environment. And the reason why I kind of was like interested in maybe like talking to you guys on Uvucast, or I guess what's this podcast called, by the way?
The
It's called
Nuthouse.
The
the Nuthouse. Oh, okay. Okay.
If we
We're
lost the
professionals,
heart,
as
that
you can
half of
tell.
it just cut out.
The Nuthouse. Okay. Oh, I totally lost my train of thought now.
You know
Oh
what?
goodness.
That's
I
the
like it.
Nuthouse
That's all that
magic.
matters.
I could
Oh,
make a
yeah,
joke, but I'm not going to.
So I was interested in maybe coming on because I noticed that like unlike I don't know if you guys I'm not really sure like what kind of like podcasts you guys like watch, but like I've seen some of like I guess was it Mahler's like podcasts and stuff, and
Yep.
it seemed like you were sort of emulating kind of like what his stuff
The
is.
funny
but
thing is
it
is
seemed a
hilarious
lot. You
because
honestly seemed a lot nicer.
Yeah,
It-
that was kind of the goal for Uvucast. I think, at least for me personally, is that I saw EFAP and I was like, "Oh no, come on! How could you like be so bad faith when responding to stuff?" I was like, "I'm going to do something different," but then I noticed I was starting to become like them the more I went on,
well,
and
yeah,
it kind of
because-
gave me a greater appreciation because I was like, "Ah, I understand how this kind of thing can happen now."
Well, yeah, because it's kind of like because like you want to pause it in order to talk, but when you pause, you're not really getting the full context.
Yeah, exactly.
You
The
know?
format was starting to
Um,
drive me insane. Yeah.
Because there
The
were some
ironic
things that
thing.
I saw that you were responding to in my video, and I'm like, I literally mentioned that right afterwards.
Yeah, I can imagine it would
And
be
that-
so frustrating to watch.
Well, it was like kind of surreal in some ways because you clipped my whole video too, and I'm just like, ugh. I don't know. I watched it like 2 times speed because I cannot otherwise.
The ironic
get through.
thing
Yeah,
about
I just
the
watched
entire
views in 2 times speed
situation
normally.
is the entire. Sorry, the ironic thing about that entire situation is that we initially started this podcast as just a group of friends who wanted to chat about videos and stuff, but that kind of started stagnating a bit, and about halfway into the thing, my thinking was, okay, how do we improve this? How do we make this a little bit more engaging? And I thought, well, let's try and emulate a little bit more of EFAP's material and try and make this a little bit more well structured. And the reason why I knew that this worked is because I already did this with some other friends on a different podcast, which I will not name for the sake of Darth's massive gasps of air that he calls laughter. But
Hey, I goose laugh. Thank you very much.
when I tried it out for myself in this stream, it ended up working out pretty well. I've had 3 streams with both Darth and Uvu, and then I had another stream with a handful of other guests. We were still, pretty casual, but we had more of a structure going on. We had a plan weeks in advance about what we wanted to cover. Everyone was made present. We didn't literally just plan what we wanted to do the night beforehand and then just wing it as we went through. We did a little bit of prep work. We did a little bit of watching of material before we covered it, and it ended up working really nicely. We still are going for that semi-casual feel that we had with the
Yeah.
Uvucast stuff, but a little bit more structured, and I think it's been working out relatively well so far.
Yeah, that's good.
One way to know though is if we cover one of your videos again, and you're like, oh, okay, they have actually gotten better. Oh, never mind, they actually still suck.
Well, I haven't. Yeah, I mean, go ahead if you
The
want.
moral of the story is never get me to manage anything.
I mean, I get it. You weren't necessarily even intending a whole. Maybe you weren't even necessarily expecting a lot of people to see it, let alone me to see it within the first 48
I
hours.
never went in with those intentions though.
No,
I
no,
never
that's
went in, I'd never distort my views and things like that based on how many people I think would see the end product. I feel like
Right.
it's kind of disingenuous,
same
but I know
here.
what you're saying. It's like,
Well, yeah, no, I gotcha, and hopefully I didn't ruin the trajectory of the second part by
No, I still
commenting.
think we covered you pretty fairly. I mean, me and Kami weren't as toxic as we probably would have been, but I don't know if we would have been as toxic anyways because we were just kind of getting tired of the entire topic anyways. So I think
Yeah,
I think
that's totally
the
fair.
overall outcome of that second stream was more or less going to be very similar to if you had sent it.
yeah, I gotcha. Just trying to like conclude it too. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, we just the consensus was let's just get through this as quickly as we can so we can go back to doing other things.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. But here we are again talking about the prequels. So.
Yeah, well, not
They
necessarily.
always
We're
bring us
talking,
comes
back.
to the prequels.
we're
always
also
happens.
talking about your
When we talk about the prequels,
opinions
in
and your
particular,
feelings about the prequels and how different
Mhm.
your views towards them are now compared to when you made your video. This is also going to be the last time I talk about the prequels for a long time, because the next video I want to talk about is
It's-
Andor, which is also a prequel, but not that bad.
I
Actually,
fucking
haven't
love
s-
Andor. As someone who was so
I haven't
black pilled on Star Wars, I adored Andor.
really. I've heard like a lot of good things about that show. But I'm skeptical because I heard a lot of good things about Mandalorian and all that.
Okay, it's
and I just
nothing
have
like
not-
those
okay.
shows. I can
Okay, but
100% guarantee that.
But
so
you
a big
have
thing
to
that I've heard
understand.
about Andor is that people usually looked at the prequels as the example of how to do politics in the Star Wars show. Darth looked at that sentiment, laughed at it maniacally, then he watched Andor and he's like, oh, so this is actually how you can do politics properly in a Star Wars setting and not have it
It's
come
so
out super
good.
goofy.
So good.
So, I guess this is maybe like a good like jumping off point for like
Mhm.
talking about the prequels. What exactly would you say is the issue with how I guess like the political underpinnings of the prequels? Like what
Yeah,
exactly would you say the
sure.
main issue is there?
Well, me and Uva
It was always
recently.
Shandy.
Oh, sorry, I didn't even hear you.
Priority speaker.
Hey.
I think politics have always been a part of Star Wars. I say the difference in the original trilogy was that they were more in the background rather than the focus, whereas the prequels tried
Right.
to make them the focus. And with that, there needs to be a greater level of complexity and nuance to justify it being in the foreground. And with the kind of world building that is presented of this galaxy that has the centralized power in the Republic, I think there's just so many things that are not explained that are very important to the conflicts going on. For example, the Phantom Menace, where you have this taxation of trade routes from the Trade Federation. When they appear in the Senate, I'm asking questions like, wait, are they a part of the Republic? Are they independent? And I feel like that just extends throughout all the movies. And it starts getting worse too, because at least in the first movie, you're able to see like opposing political perspectives. And it's not just like the Senate isn't a hive mind, so you get more of a sense of how things function. But from that point, especially in Attack of the Clones, where it's a central political conflict of whether we should
Mhm.
have militarization, we should have an official army for the Republic or not. The problem then starts becoming there isn't anyone who is opposing this or in favor of it. We start losing the sense of like, what are people's actual ideologies behind this? And I think the implication is that Palpatine is just manipulating everything behind the scenes, but that's so fucking lame because we don't see it. And it just seems rather infeasible for him to have everyone in his pocket at that point.
Yeah, so I guess like I believe that the Trade Federation is like in Phantom Menace. I believe that they're a part of the Senate, but they're okay because like so Newt Gunray and like Rune Haku, I think is the guy's names. They're kind of like opposing like the main like Naboo. They're working with Sidious like to kind of like blockade Naboo and basically um they're trying to like occupy Naboo and get like Padme to sign like the treaty and so on. But I think that but then when you actually see like the Senate, you see people representing like the Trade Federation and they're denying like everything like complicity in this. And I guess the one thing that I will say about that is like I guess perhaps it is maybe a little bit confusing whether or not like Newt Gunray is acting semi-independently or they're just like lying
Yeah.
to everybody's faces. I think that is a little bit vague now that I think about it.
Well,
I
their
think in
entire
like the
operation relies on them having a mutual agreement with Palpatine that he'll sort out certain
yeah.
legislations to help them actually like make their invasion legal. Because
Mhm.
if they don't have Palpatine, then well, they can't really get as far as they do in the
Or
first
Sidious in
movie.
this yeah.
It's a
Yeah,
bit
what's it is.
backwards though if you think about it, because the only reason they want to invade Naboo is because that's Palpatine's wishes.
Yes. It's a position where he has a very grand seat of power that lets him become the senator at the end of the day, because it's
He
his.
wants
I
to
guess
take advantage of the crisis, yeah.
Yeah.
I guess maybe the potential problem with that though is the fact that it's like very like the actual specifics are a little bit vague in how they're presented. to the point that we're maybe kind of left with a little bit more questions. One of the things that always kind of bothered me a little bit about like Attack of the Clones is that when they're like signing like when they're kind of like they're creating that kind of like separatist like group like under the like with Dooku at the head, it's always like with the attention of like, oh, Padme will be executed, and they have the execution, but like they don't. But she like escapes it, and then like they kind of just like just go along with it. Yeah, I always felt like that thing was a little bit, and I thought that if I were to make a Attack of Clones video, I'd kind of like first think a bit more critically about that, and then kind of like see like how much that makes sense. But but yeah, I will say that maybe like if there's like an issue with like how the politics are presented, I think it's not necessarily like always what is like what actually occurs, but more so like how vague it is expressed, because sometimes we're kind of like we don't really always know like the specifics, and that can kind of like leave like audiences like scratching their heads like about the specifics.
Oh, sorry, I thought you were done.
Sorry, and I
Go
was
ahead.
gonna. Oh, damn it! I have a thought in my head. Sorry.
What happened to Darth? I mean,
Rock, paper,
my
scissors, to who gets
problem-
to go first?
Thank you, internet. Very cool.
Sure.
I'm back.
Uvu.
Okay. My problem with the politics in the prequels is how incredibly static they are. The first movie, what happens is Chancellor Valorum is kicked out via vote of no confidence. And then what happens from there forth is the Senate is just a hive mind. It's like it just agrees with everything. You never see any dissent in the Senate. You never see any like actual like bribery or corruption happening other than like the courts and things like that. And imagine if you had, I think in one of the comics they were doing this, you've got like obviously the Senate didn't 100% vote Palpatine off, so they're obviously people. Sorry, Valorum off, so they're probably people that still.
I don't think it was 100%.
Yeah, so there are people that like on his side, and what you can have is Valorum actually trying to investigate things like he does in the comics, and
Actually,
have like
that's
a
good point.
have like a 30-70 like sect in the Senate. So you got 30% for Valorum and 70% for Palpatine or whatever, and then you work it out from there, and you can figure out things corruption wise and Senate wise, and do a lot of world building. My problem with it is it's so baseline. It's like go to Senate say yes to 100% power because Jar Jar said so. It's like cool.
Jar Jar.
Yeah.
Oh my god, why did Padme make him his fucking diplomat?
It's just It
Well, he
just
represents
feels
like
like
the
it's.
younger people, I guess. So.
It just feels
But
like it's
why
not
Jar
respecting
Jar
the
of all
audience.
Gungans? Good god.
Well, because he doesn't belong with the others, because like he's like kind of first is banished, and then he becomes like a general with the intention of like I don't know, killing him at the front lines of the battle or something, and then like
perfect
and then it's like fine,
representative.
just get out of here, but right, because he's like better off like representing like.
But surely the Gungans would want actual representation.
I was gonna say, surely Boss Nass would
joined
like.
with the NÄBULA.
Boss Nass would love to have a seat on the council. Imagine that. He'd be like, "Yo,
Well,
I get to go to Coruscant."
I think they just don't really like anybody else.
They like
I
the
think
NÄBULA
like
by the end of Phantom
Speaking-
Menace because
I was
they
gonna say-
joined together to fight against the Separatists. Oh,
right, and then I
yes.
guess you see them all at like Padme's like funeral too, I guess.
So
Yeah,
yes,
that's
one
true,
last
actually, I
thing.
forgot about that.
With
Yeah.
the Senate,
Oh well. Yeah, go ahead.
why do you think it is, and why is it explained in this way? Why does no one hologram into the Senate meetings?
Oh yeah, the fact Padme can't even hologram into the Senate, so they have to appoint Jar Jar. It seems very contrived to me.
Right, because nowadays we have like people like testifying via Zoom and stuff. Yeah,
Like,
I gotcha.
imagine having a galaxy spanning light years and one planet where all of the meetings happen, and like every week you have to like go from your fucking house all the way to Coruscant every week or
Well, I
month
mean, the
or whatever
Jedi
it is.
Council themselves actually hold Jedi meetings
Yeah,
via
exactly.
holograms.
The Jedi are allowed
Yeah.
to hologram,
Oh,
but not
yeah.
senators.
Yeah, but I just wanted to springboard
I
off
don't
of
know.
Uvu's point earlier on, where he said that the politics felt static, and I suppose that would actually be my biggest complaint with the politics is just how they're presented. not necessarily the actual like content of the politics themselves, but just how inane and how boring it is to listen to. And that's not because politics are boring, but the delivery for a lot of the lines for these characters is very monotone. It's very bland. It's very stoic. I rewatched the movies this week now with Uvu, one a day. And if I didn't have Call of Duty in the
Godspeed.
background, or if I
Thanks.
didn't have Devil May Cry in the background keeping me busy, I would genuinely have just fallen asleep watching those movies. It is actually so difficult for me to watch the prequels anymore because I don't find it interesting to listen to the politics because no one
Interesting.
has any sense of urgency. Like in the Phantom Menace, I can't remember the guy's name, but he's a delegate for Padme. He holograms into her like halfway into the movie, and he's like, "You must send for aid now. Our people are dying. You must sign," or something like that. And he might be the only person with even a sense of urgency in that movie. Everyone else is just like, my people are dying. They're like, it's an actual meme
Yeah.
to me that they managed to get Queen Amidala in full dress to go, please, I need assistance right now. My people are
dying.
starving. I need
Meanwhile,
people.
Jar Jar sounds more like invested in what's happening.
Yeah, like
So, so would you say like a big problem with it is kind of like just like how the lines are delivered and how like everything in the movie, because like not only are like the
yeah,
Jedi
I
Knights
think that
kind
that
of
would be like the
stoic.
biggest hurdle to get through for me first before I get to the actual content of the politics
Okay.
themselves. It's
Because that's
just
the
like
human
the
connection, right?
actual
That's your like
presentation.
into the story
Yeah.
of this
I
fantastical sci-fi world.
Like if I had to
I
look
mean,
at A New Hope and the first scene with Leia when she meets Darth Vader, you know, she's being sassy, she's being rebellious, but she's still speaking in a formal manner, so you get a sense of, oh, this is going to be a likable character right away, even if what she's saying might not be like the most
Right.
And we don't even know her cause by that point, but we're
informal
invested
thing.
in her character, so we care about her cause as a result. I think
Yeah,
that's
and
the
then
key.
you contrast that with Darth Vader himself, like being super sassy and being like, "Oh, you're just being very silly."
You weren't
I
on
know
any
that you
mission, you should be
transmitted
tired.
plans onto your rebel ship. Where are those plans? And it's like you get a very interesting dynamic between these two characters, and that immediately invests you into the rest of their story. And then you meet other characters like Luke and Obi-Wan, and they have their own dynamic going on, and their presentation is really heartfelt and really earnest. Then you go into the Phantom Menace, and Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon Jinn are just like these stoic robots a lot of the time.
Right,
Like,
and then everybody else does too. It seems like, except for
yeah,
Jar Jar. So Jar Jar becomes really jarring. Jar
like
Jarring.
That's the thing. That was my big thing when we jumped from the Phantom Menace to Attack of the Clones. Is like the first time we see Padme on screen, she like twitches her facial muscle. She actually like smiles for a bit and like actually looks like a human being. The facial acting in the first movie is for everyone is just non-existent. Basically, it's quite horrifying, especially watching something like Hot D and they're like amazing facial
now,
performances.
Jane, in case you aren't aware, Hot Dean is a reference to House of the Dragon. These people are just bananas.
Okay, I have not seen.
What do
I
you
have not-
mean?
I've-
George R. R. Martin himself called it Hot D. That's where everyone got it from.
Well, I mean,
Mhm.
that
I haven't
doesn't.
even-
Jane's even just admitted she hasn't really seen the show or knows anything about
I
it. So
haven't,
I'm
I
just
haven't even
making
seen
that
Game
clear
of
of what it
Thrones.
is.
Okay, gotcha.
No, that's fine. I just want to make
Fine.
it clear of what that is.
Yeah, sorry, I was just pointing
Yeah,
to
no.
something that's popular and recent, so it's got more appeal.
Yeah, no, that's fine.
I think like you kind of pinpointed one of like the general dissatisfactions that people have going from the original trilogy to the prequels, which is kind of like how it's either like super stoic or super comic, and it becomes really
Yeah.
And as I was saying, like it becomes a little bit jarring. Yeah,
For
I could
sure.
see it. I could see that. I guess like what I would say is like it's never really, even when I was younger, I never really had a problem with it. I always just kind of saw it as like, okay, so this trilogy, it's more, so the original trilogy is more about like the rebels and stuff, but this trilogy is more about like kind of like people in more consistently formal positions of like power or kind of like, or abiding by some kind of like political or like kind of like ideological code. And I guess I've never really had much of an issue because but I also think that like for this reason, I guess you could say, hmm, I think that like in Attack of Clones especially, I think there is like some a little bit more lightheartedness and kind of like happiness that's expressed between like within that kind of romance, like regardless of what you think about like the actual like dialogue and how convincing or unconvincing it is.
Well, you see, the
I do
thing
think
is that I actually have the opposite problem. In Phantom
Mhm.
Menace, there wasn't enough emotion. In Attack of the Clones, there's too much emotion for that specific
Hmm.
romance. Because when
Okay.
Anakin is present on screen, I feel like he's just doing too much to sell that he's this angsty teenager, that he's angry and he's upset, and it's like there are certain scenes where it feels appropriate to be that level of angry and that level of angsty, but there are other scenes where it's like you could definitely just like tone that down a little bit. You did not need to be this
Yeah, there's not really any
upfront.
subtlety in Hayden's performance in Attack of the
No,
Clones. It
there
takes
was more
until
subtlety
Revenge
in
of
the
the Sith for
third
that to come
movie.
out.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna say like I'm like almost like compelled to like disagree with you, but then I just think like well, but then again I think in Revenge of the Sith he does a lot better job. So
He's probably given
um,
better material there too, to be fair.
yeah, I'm not sure. I'm not exactly sure like what everybody's here's like general opinions are on like each film in relationship to each other, but like I always thought that the third one was like a lot better than the other two.
The one thing the
Um,
third
I think
film
it's
has that
better.
I
I
think
don't
is
think it's significantly better. I think it has all of the
Okay.
same issues the other films do.
I
I
am of
certainly
the
would never put it
opinion.
above something like Return of the Jedi, like I've seen a lot of people do. I just think the original trilogy is in a completely different class, the prequel trilogy.
I'm of the opinion that 1 is the best, 3's in the middle, and then 2 is marginally worse than those two.
one thing I
But
appreciate about
1 is
3
the
that
best.
the other ones don't do is that Phantom Menace and Attack of the Clones has this really odd looking filter on it that makes everything look super hazy and like it's out of focus. Revenge of the Sith
Mhm.
doesn't have that, and it's a lot clearer of a picture to see. Like
Oh
I
yeah.
that was the one thing I immediately noticed while watching like the opening 10 minutes of that movie is how clear the movie was. Like nothing felt
Mhm.
like I was looking at it through a half-eaten tub of Nutella. It was
It's an evocative image.
I
that was immediately brownie points for me,
I
but
think
I still was pretty
It's
fun
almost like
watching it.
oversaturated or something, or
Yeah,
kind
like a
of like
very fake looking background and people and creatures. It was not a fun time watching
Creature.
this movie. Those
um,
movies.
And I also felt like the one thing I will say, and this is one criticism I have of kind of like the way that he kind of revised, because actually the Phantom Menace has had some like a little bit of like revision to it beyond just like Yoda
Oh
like
yeah.
becoming digital, but because like they end up changing like the color timing of that film, and I honestly felt like it looked better before. It was actually a little bit more pinker, but I felt like the world itself was more consistent to look at. And I felt like he kind of like tried to make it more clear, but as a result, in the process of doing that, it almost became like this I don't know, it kind of almost like met halfway and doesn't quite look as good as I think it was like intended to.
Which film is this in
Um,
reference to?
Phantom Menace.
Oh, okay, right.
That's in a weird
Yeah.
position because that was the last Star Wars film shot on analog film.
Mhm.
And you can still see a lot of analog techniques like models being used, which I think still holds up really well today. Sorry,
Well, there
models
are
for the
models.
spaceships, I should say.
Well, okay. It's been a while. I've actually been a little bit Star Wars out until recently. But I believe that they actually did use quite a lot of models for the prequel trilogy.
They did,
But
yeah.
actually,
Yes.
but I think that's also something that like prequel apologists will kind of like just jump to kind of like defend. Like, huh? Did you know that actually they used a lot of? But it's like, okay, sure.
That's
Yeah.
always like
but this-
missing
You know what
the
the-
initial criticism, which is that it looks fake. It's like it doesn't really matter what technique was used if
I was
the
gonna
it's
say-
like,
result isn't.
You know
oh,
what
it's
the
like,
worst
oh,
part-
okay. Okay, like Dexter's Diner and like Camino is like a lot of it's not actually digital. Cool, but it still looks fake.
Yeah, exactly.
I
That's the
think
problem.
I'm not sure
I
why it
think
exists either.
I think a Camino is the tunnels in Camino are like a miniature that they green screen the actors onto.
Mhm.
That might be wrong, but that's what I heard a while ago. I don't remember if it's
There's
true,
so
but
much green screening, regardless
even
of
if
whether
it is
models are
true,
used or not, because you still have to
yeah,
composite your actors onto the model.
Right, and
yeah,
you
which
didn't
leads
really
to
get those.
Camino looking like the most fake location in its entire series.
Korra
In
It looks
my
like the
and
opinion.
most.
Solo.
Oh yeah, fucking Coruscant too. At least in some instances of Coruscant, there are
Coruscant in the
others
first
that.
movie. Jesus
Yeah,
Christ.
Coruscant in the
Those
first movie. That's
sunsets look so
pretty
fucking
bad.
weird in the first movie.
I think Camino probably looks the most consistently worse. But Coruscant definitely has.
I feel like
Since
the
we're-
outside. I feel like that. Well, it does look like the most fake, but
Which leads me to the. Oh,
Mhm.
sorry. Yeah, go on. So, I was
No,
gonna
go
say
ahead,
just
go
to
ahead.
cut off the whole. I was just gonna say. I was gonna say I was just trying to move it on because it was going on the same thing for a little bit, but which leads me to the worst part about the prequel criticism, and it's the new group of people who did sit on comparing them directly to the sequels.
Oh, I mean, oof. Don't
And
get me
then
started with
immediately
the
saying they're
sequels.
better, therefore.
Oh my
Therefore
god,
good.
what about
Yeah,
makes
it's
these discussions so painful?
This is
I
where we
don't.
get
I mean,
into
I would
Anomaly
say.
Inc.
I would say that like the sequel trilogy is like obviously better than like the holiday special, but I don't really see that as I don't see that as like any like mark of like quality for the
Yeah,
sequel
Yeah,
exactly. It's not
so-
exactly like a
I mean,
glowing
Yeah,
I mean, I
the
also
sequels.
I'm also of the opinion. I mean, I'm kind of really mixed on like Last Jedi, but I think it's easily better than the Abrams films. Just because like I think Abrams like constantly panders to nostalgia so hard, and he
Yeah.
at the
I'm
very
getting less
least like
tolerant of that now.
yeah, at the very least Johnson doesn't like
Especially after Andor.
he
Oh,
at
yeah.
least like lets at least some room to breathe at times, but I feel like Abrams is like constant momentum. Shove this in your face, shove this in your face, shove this in your face, and it never lets up. And it's like, oh my goodness, just like let that film just breathe for 10 seconds.
Yeah.
And I feel like Johnson was a little bit better at that, although some of his like narrative choices are very bizarre to me.
I think
But
you're
at
joking
any
from
rate,
bad.
well, at times, yes. But I would say with that film, like it's like I think that that's like I think that that film's like in my opinion just clearly better than the Abrams films. But I
Technically
don't think that
speaking, I
that
would agree, yeah.
yeah, but I don't think that really makes it like
Anything?
obviously yeah. I don't think that
Yeah,
necessarily
because the
like
film's
that's not
the
a
sum of
mark of
its
quality in
parts, right?
itself.
It's funny that you're
Mhm.
mentioning TLJ because it's something that you mentioned earlier on that I actually wanted to poke around with
Sure.
is the idea that the reason why the prequel movies are so beloved and why they should be held to a higher standard than something like the sequel trilogy is that they were made with a lot more passion in mind and that the people involved were a lot more energetic and they enjoyed working on the project and stuff. So therefore, it's going to be better. And I find that funny because these same people who would hold the prequels to that standard because they were made with passion in mind will then also crap out TLJ for being a corporate money grabbing piece of consumerism when there is tons and tons of evidence of people who were involved with that project who enjoyed working on it. They were very passionate about it. Ryan Johnson himself says that he was a very eager Star Wars fan and he
I
wanted to
think
do a really good job making it. And it's like, yeah, you're passionate about it, but the passion doesn't necessarily translate to quality. And these people will
yeah.
say that with regards to TLJ, but they won't accept that when it comes to the prequels.
Oh yeah, that's kind of like one of the things I found really kind of like ironic about. Did you guys see Rick's video on like the ranking of the Star Wars films?
Yes, we did. Yeah, he put The Last Jedi at the bottom below movies that weren't even Star Wars movies, and we were fucking so
Was that
confused
wait,
'cause it was
was that before Rise of Skywalker came out?
That was before. Yeah, I think it was like a week before
Okay.
Rise of Skywalker came out. Yeah, I remember. Oh, the only one I remember is that he fucking. There was this movie called Hookers Bleeding from Their Assholes or some shit, and he said it was a better Star Wars movie than The Last Jedi. And I was
Yeah,
so
like
confused.
Rebecca Black Friday. Rebecca
God,
Black's
what a
Yeah,
Friday.
great
That
video.
Yeah, I
which
think
is like a
Rebecca Black Friday
10-year-old
was on that
joke.
video. Yeah, it was. It
It's
was
a
such a.
10-year-old joke.
It was such a fucking petty video because it was just. Oh yeah, I was not a fan of that video by any means.
Does
Oh
not
yeah,
sound like
but
you
he
were,
hit
no.
it like dead last. I feel like you can't really, in good faith, say that like the holiday special is better unless you just
No,
find
yeah, that was something
like
we said, I believe. It was like, no, you can't say the holiday special is better. It's just not. Like,
The thing with me is,
Oh,
I don't
yeah.
even know where I would rank the sequels in terms of quality or enjoyment. I hate them all equally. I don't like a single one
Really.
of the sequel movies, like at all. I actively avoided
Hmm.
watching The Last Jedi and Rise of Skywalker for years I saw them for the first time in the middle of this year. So TLJ
Oh,
came out in
really?
2017, and Rise of Skywalker came out in 2019, I think. And I saw them for the first time this year. I thought that I would be a little bit nicer to them because I was watching them like years after they came out. I did not like them at all. I'm not the biggest Star Wars fan. I actively don't care about a lot of the content. I still despise watching those movies. I think I hate Rise of Skywalker more just because I felt like it was wasting my time. But TLJ was
I
also not an enjoyable watch for me. I did not like watching that.
I definitely think Rise of Skywalker is the worst after consideration and
Yeah,
years
actually
of
no.
thinking about
I'll
it.
take back my previous
I knew
statement. Rise
Rise
of
of
Skywalker is the
Skywalker.
worst.
Rise of
I knew
Skywalker feels incredibly cartoonish, just compared to everything else in the saga.
I knew Rise of Skywalker was worse because I watched it. I got to watch it. Like, this one's the worst one.
Yeah,
by
that
far.
one's like really bad. But I think like I do find it very strange that kind of like the huge like hesitation towards Last Jedi from prequel fans. It's like, okay, so what exactly is the what like not just like, oh well they don't like the story, but like they have like this really like strong like disdain for it, like more than the other films that were released by Disney or not by like Lucas on it, and I find that very peculiar.
I think it's emotional connection. That's usually what this comes down to.
What? Because they like make Luke like a hermit or
Yeah,
something.
I think a
But
lot of people hold Luke in
it's
very
literally
high
set up by
regard.
Abrams though. So
Well,
Not
there's not.
necessarily, and this is something interesting I learned behind the scenes actually, was that in an initial draft of the Force Awakens ending, there was going to be rocks floating around Luke, which
yeah,
implies he
yeah.
still has a connection to the Force, but
Well,
Ryan
he still has a
Johnson
connection.
requested that that was taken out because he wanted to make sure that Luke was disconnected from the Force.
Well, but then also like there's several moments throughout like first I know because if I remember right, I just watched it not too long ago. There's a few moments in the Force Awakens where they basically say that he is that he like abandoned everybody or whatever. So maybe he didn't disconnect from the Force, but he still like left people and went to that island.
Well,
you
isn't
know?
there
Two ways
isn't
to
there a
take
line
it.
of
You've got the kind of Return of the Jedi style, oh, I need to go on my own Luke, where he tries to
Yeah.
fight the Force all on his own. And so he's looking for ways to combat the darkness. But then you've also got the Last Jedi approach, which is just that he's given up and he's come to this island to die. And I think JJ was leaning more towards the first rather than the second.
Yeah, because there's actually dialogue in the first film that directly states that Luke was trying to do a Return of the Jedi thing where he was going out to find information to combat this new emerging threat found with the dark side.
Oh, which was
You-
probably Snoke or whatever, right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
you
yeah.
had the guy at the start of the movie. I can't remember his name, but he was talking to Poe, and he's like, "This is a map that will lead you directly to Luke
Oh.
Skywalker."
Oh,
You've
Max
got-
von
Excellent.
Sydow.
You've
Yeah,
got
Full use of
Hans.
Max von Sydow, yeah.
You've got Han Solo, who
Yeah.
says that he thinks Luke found the first Jedi temple, which was implying that he was like trying to find ancient knowledge to help him combat this new line of Sith
Yep.
that he was up against.
And
So-
instead he got black pilled because he learned the
Yeah.
Jedi sucked ass and
Yeah, it
Sidious
feels
took
like
them over.
a retcon.
the
yeah.
the
Like they-
thing with the Force Awakens is that it's not really a movie; it's a setup movie. It's meant to give you a
Well-
whole bunch of stuff.
It also
that just-
kneecaps any potential for the trilogy quite a bit. Which is
It really
unfortunate.
does because it resets the universe back to square one, back to A New Hope for no apparent reason other than people really like the first
Well-
Star Wars movie. Let's just make that again.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, that's kind of the thing. It just keeps like trying to imitate like the original Star Wars from '77, but it just keeps like, but it doesn't do it though, because like if you
No,
watch
it's a
like
poor imitation.
a
but it's
very
good.
good imitation, yeah.
it's the same like story beats more or less, but the actual like pacing and like the actual tone very different.
Yes.
And I think that what it's doing is it's not invoking like Star Wars so much as like the idea of loving Star Wars, which I find really kind of
That's a really good
Hyper-cons-
way of putting it.
No,
hyper
it's very
consumerist and gross thing.
it's a very accurate
It's
way
very
because I
meta
remember
and it's very breaking a verisimilitude because I don't like it when the people in the universe are aware of the things that we are aware of. it just constantly breaks immersion
Well,
unless you're doing
that's the
something very
funny thing
deliberate or
because
satirical.
there's several lines of dialogue in the movie from characters like Rey and like Finn where they're like, "Oh, did this thing actually happen? Did the rebellion actually do this thing? Was Luke Skywalker an actual person?" And Han Solo was like, "Yeah, no, this actually really did happen. Yeah, Luke is actually a real person. Yes, the Force is real." And it's like, um, why wouldn't this just be common knowledge for people? Like the
Yeah, they're
rebellion
pretending like
happened
it's
like
100
40.
years after what happened in
Yeah,
Return of the
it's like
Jedi instead of
Yeah.
no
30.
way.
Oh,
It's like
they
if
keep
everyone
calling it
forgot
like
the
a
events
myth.
of World War II 30 years later. It's
No,
like,
it's even
huh?
worse than
that's
that.
what-
It'd be like if people today didn't know the Berlin Wall was real.
To be fair, a lot of people don't. A lot of people don't. A lot of
Well,
people are very
I guess it's just
uneducated.
but it's a matter of
Winston
like what
Churchill was
was.
a myth.
Yeah, they keep saying like, "Oh, I thought that was a myth. I thought that was a myth." In fairness, I do think that in the original trilogy, they kind of act that way about some of the things that happened in the prequels, which was like what 20
Yeah,
years
and I
or
kind of
something
blame the
ago.
prequels for that,
Yep.
honestly.
Yeah, I mean, like I think I mean like I could probably nitpick some like kind of incongruity between the two. That of course somebody like Rick would just stubbornly reject. Like, whoa, I bet Lucas has an answer to all of it. Like,
You
okay.
planned this all along.
It was a reference to James Bond.
You didn't plan
actually.
it. You didn't plan it all along. I don't know if you know this, but the original draft of like Return of the Jedi revealed that Owen Lars is like Obi-Wan's brother.
Yeah, and instead of
Like-
Leia being Luke's sister, he had a lost sister starting with an N. I forget what she's called, but yeah.
Oh, yeah, that actually might have been an earlier draft. Yeah. But this was
Yeah,
like
I remember hearing about that. Yeah.
Yeah, the
Yeah,
behind the
it's-
scenes of the original trilogy is very fascinating, and yes, very revealing of how good Lucas was at making it look like he always had this planned, but in actuality, it was writing by the seat of
Fluke.
his
I mean,
pants in a lot of
I mean, I
situations.
think he had like kind of a general baseline like vision.
Oh yeah, I'm sure he
in
planned
mind,
some
but
stuff, just not as much as he
but even like
believe.
Vader being like Luke's father kind of like came about probably in like 79 or something. So
Yeah, no,
Yeah,
it definitely was not the idea in A New Hope. I think that is pretty clear.
but yeah.
Yeah, I guess I
Um,
think that's more important is making it seem like you had it planned out rather
Yeah,
than
exactly.
actually
Yeah.
having it planned
It's
out.
it's again, it's the result being more important than the technique that got you there.
Yeah. I agree with that.
Yeah, that's kind of. But I do find it very strange how like, I guess like to kind of a detour to kind of like the way that prequel apologists kind of approach like these movies and kind of like their nonstop like love for the unfailable like George Lucas. It's like they don't because they're so used to people like hating on these films that they're so dear to them. They now want to stand up for any and every criticism.
Yeah, it's a massive
And
correction.
to the point where it's like it's fine to critique things. Like I mean, like
Another
you can
thing that I'm
critique
not
the.
a big fan of from these people is that they will just
These
they will
people.
they will attack anything that doesn't have George Lucas's name attached to it, so post Disney purchase, but they'll still heavily defend pieces of Star Wars content that wasn't made directly by Lucas. So you'll look at things like expanded material, like the comic
Oh
books,
right,
like
yeah.
TV shows, like video games. And I
Video
mean,
games
a
and
lot
stuff.
of that stuff is actually really, really well done. I mean, you look at the KOTOR games, I've heard absolutely marvelous things about the KOTOR games. I've heard some of the Star Wars Jedi comics were really good. Darth has been showing me panels about how the clone troopers are actually, competent and not
Oh
just.
yeah, the Clone Wars comics compared to the prequels and compared to Lucas's own The Clone Wars, it's
But the
just
thing
night and
is
day.
that I want to highlight is that there is a bit of a Hippocratic nature there because while Lucas did sign off on that stuff, he didn't assist in making all of it because I mean, one man cannot be
No,
responsible
it'd
for
be
all of that
logistically
content.
impossible.
And a lot of these prequel defenders will still pretend like even some of the more questionable stuff from the expanded material is still good because this was pre-Disney purchase, so therefore it is still actually Star Wars. Where if you look at some of the stuff that
Okay.
come out after the Disney purchase, they'll be like, "Oh no, this is not Lucas's name attached to it. This is bad."
Yeah, but in fairness, like isn't like Dave Filoni like he's been like working on stuff since like what 2008, and he
Dave
like is still
Filoni
like
is
in the
seen as
game, right?
Jedi
The Clone Wars is in a
Jesus at this
weird
point.
position. It's kind of
Yeah,
like the bridging point
so
between the two canons.
Yeah. So what's the problem? I don't understand like where a lot of like prequel like.
Dave Filoni's a weird one for me because I know that a lot of people just appreciate him for still sticking to quote unquote classic Star Wars by introducing all these elements that
Is
people
he?
like. I mean, the thing with The
No.
Mandalorian is that it came out after the sequel trilogy kind of crapped on a lot of
Bar's never
people's.
been lower.
Yeah, it came out after the sequel trilogy, crapped on a lot of people's expectations for what it was going to be, and people were just really sick with the idea that Luke was getting crapped on by Rian Johnson and J.J. Abrams.
Right.
So
Rise of
they
Skywalker was so
Boo
convoluted
Hill.
and complicated that
so they
just a
see something like
simple
Mandalorian
story.
coming out, and it's set after the original trilogy, but before the sequel. So it's exploring this world that's kind of like still forming after the end of the Empire, and people absolutely loved it. They were introducing aspects like Luke in season 2. People just absolutely
God, he's
adored
so
it.
fucking lame in The Mandalorian. I've never seen such an overcorrection in the opposite direction
Yeah,
from what
no,
happened in TLJ.
people. I remember when that.
Well, even like Rise of Skywalker is trying to kind of
Yeah,
kind of have
that's
its cake and
Oh,
eat it
yeah,
too
the-
by appealing to both Last Jedi fans and Last Jedi haters.
Rise of
and
Skywalker
Like,
feels
appeasing
like
none of
it's
them.
yeah,
it's
it
quite
feels
funny.
like it's antagonistic to the previous movie.
Yeah, it feels like they're having some sort of giant dick battle.
well, it's like,
Yeah.
it definitely has like a big identity crisis at the very least.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, Mandalorian was trying to appease like the core Star Wars fan, and it worked. Like so many
Somehow.
people loved
I wish it hadn't.
Mandalorian. They love Mandalorian season 2. It was enough for them to stick around to watch shows like Kenobi, to watch shows like Book of Boba Fett, to watch shows like Andor. Now you've got the upcoming Tales of the Jedi. It just came out. Sorry.
But the people
You've
who
got
love
Ahsoka.
Mandalorian do not like Andor because Andor is the anti-Mandalorian.
Yes,
I
yeah.
don't know what any of this means now.
What I was referring
There
to
are
is that
new Star Wars films.
Mandalorian as a show got people excited for shows coming out in the
Right.
future, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they would like
I guess
it when
it
it
did
actually came
technically
out.
keep the Star Wars torch alight, yeah, instead
Yes.
of having it fade into obscurity once the main movies had ended.
Yes, because it made things more nostalgic by nature by introducing things like Ahsoka, by introducing things like Boba Fett.
And honestly, Andor
like-
probably wouldn't be the way it was if it wasn't for the Mandalorian, because in many ways it feels like a response to those kinds of shows. So yeah, I guess I have to kind of tolerate its existence somewhat.
I mean, it is what it is. I still haven't seen Andor, so I still need to watch it. But yeah, I do agree that it annoys me that people are like, oh, there's no cameos in this, there's no recognizable character in this, there's no
Oh yeah,
blah 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 blah
and,
blah.
well,
So
they
that's
get like
so
that with
bad.
like the Marvel movies too, don't they?
Yeah.
Like where it's like at this point they just want like more cameos. They just want more
Well,
stuff. More
that's
stuff. Like, oh, I want
more-
more teases for the next thing. That's just gonna
Where's-
tease at the next thing.
Yeah, it feels
Where's
like that.
Captain America?
Yeah, like Mandalorian season 2 is basically just like cameos the show, setting up every other Star Wars show that would be coming out for the next 5 years.
Yep,
Oh
pretty
my
much.
goodness.
But yeah, no,
Yeah, and
you. The Marvel comparison is a bit of a weird one because you have the nostalgia bait that is No Way Home, and that movie made like $1.6 billion in like 2 months. Then you have other movies that are kind of like their own thing, like Eternals, where it was just trying to focus on its own central core group of characters, and that movie bombed. But at the same time, you can also look at COVID as a reason for. I don't really know. Marvel Phase 4 has
Yeah.
just been a mess.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, as long as people become less interested in those movies, I think
I
that's
Yeah,
a
agree.
plus.
I'm hoping that's where it's going because
Yeah,
good God,
honestly,
we need a
same.
revolution in
Well-
like general audience expectation,
Well,
or else
well,
we're
actually-
gonna be
actually,
driven
that
into the
kinda-
ground.
It kind of reminds me because something that I noticed with like a lot of like prequel, like the hardcore prequel apologists, is that they seem to be perfectly fine with the idea of Star Wars constantly doing the same like non-stop like roller coaster ride of like giving you new stuff. They just want it to be more like the other stuff instead of like they just want like
How
Lucas to have
deeply
involvement.
fucking ironic is that, considering that the prequels were like this completely new take on Star Wars at the time, and Lucas's number one priority was just constantly showing like new
Well, yeah, that's kind of
aliens, new
yeah.
planets.
Yeah, and I think like people want things to be more like the original, and I feel like that's why Force Awakens was still kind of like liked
Yeah.
at first.
But that's
Yeah.
something that's really irritating me now because Andor is a show which is set before the OT and it's exploring a world that's bridging the prequels and the OT and it's doing its own thing. It's trying to explore new aspects of the universe that people haven't seen before and trying to expand this galaxy of far, far away. And people despise it for doing that because it's nothing like what they're familiar with. And it's like, is there any pleasing you people? You complain when things are too much like the same, but
I
then when there's
hope that
something
there's
that's
a
different,
loud
you're like, oh no, this is too
minority.
different.
I think Andor is actually doing quite successful numbers behind the scenes, so I hope that at least sets a precedent to stop relying so much on nostalgia. Because it's interesting that Andor is in such familiar territory, yet it is very deliberate when it chooses to include pre-existing elements, and it provides such a fresh take on the universe overall.
Yep. Yeah, the tonal weight that things like the Stormtroopers have after not seeing them for 7 episodes is quite, like,
Yeah,
well done.
that's
I think
incredible
that's a big
restraint.
reason for why games like Jedi Fallen Order did so well, is because it was exploring aspects of the world that wasn't intrinsically tied to the OT, but kind of like on the sidelines.
Yeah, there's a lot of
Um,
new stuff in that game. That's a good
yeah.
point.
There's a sequel that's coming out now, so that game must have done relatively well for itself. Either that, or people were just ecstatic to have a single-player
Yeah, I'm
Star
looking
Wars
forward
game
to it.
again. So it could just be a bit of A and a
Yeah,
bit of
it's
B.
definitely that because not only was it a single player game, but it was one that was traditional. No microtransactions, no bullshit, just buy the game,
To be
get what you
honest,
want.
I
From
kind
EA
of
of
want to.
all places.
I kind of want
Nuts.
to see a world where microtransactions were implemented, so I could get a different fucking outfit that isn't just the
Well,
goddamn poncho.
they've got customization options in the new game that are not ponchos, so you'd be pleased to know that.
Yeah, but still, I'm looking forward to playing the new game. I still need to finish the first one. I haven't gone like more than a third of the way into that one, but that should be fun. But one thing that we kind of moved on past this, but this is something that I wanted to mention. Aesthetic wise, I don't like the way the prequels look, especially in comparison to the OT. The OT was felt very grounded. You know, the ships weren't like this pristine hospitalized environment. There was dirt, there was grime. People had like battle marks and uh, dirt covering their armor. You know, they looked like they were worn. They looked like they were deployed several times. Even the clone troopers in their pristine white coloring, you could see that there was a little bit of wear and tear here and there. In the prequels, everything looks like it's just got
You
a.
mean Stormtroopers, not clone troopers.
Sorry?
You said clone troopers. Did you mean
I hear
I
some
meant to
weird
say
static.
stormtroopers, yeah. That's Uvu the static.
Sorry.
No, that's all good. Um, yeah, the prequels just look very, very glossy, and I
I
don't
don't.
like how it goes from this very pristine, glossy-looking world into the more realistic, grungy-looking world that you have in the OT. It's a very drastic contrast for
I
me.
know it's intentional. I think the issue is more presentation rather than design because I think the world of the prequels can work if it's through a more grounded lens in terms of the actual filmmaking because everything looks so floaty because everything's like very
Yeah,
obviously
everything
composited
looks
on top of each
fake. Like
other.
I believe there actually is dirt on the clone troopers in many scenes in Revenge of the Sith. I think the
Yeah,
problem there is
it
that
makes sense for them to be pristine
they
in terms of
don't
clones because
they
they're
don't
literally
physically
been made.
look like they're there
Yeah,
on the ground
yeah,
because
yeah,
they're not.
yeah. No, they're all digital.
Yeah,
Yeah,
which
at least the costumes.
Because that's one thing I noticed about the comic book panels that Darth was sharing with me, and I know this is a bit of a weird comparison to make because it's different mediums, but everything in those comic book panels looked like they belonged. It made the
Yeah,
world seem very real and very
it helps the wartime
OT-like.
vibe quite a lot too.
Yeah, I don't get
And
that
the
vibe from the
designs aren't
prequels.
changed. The designs are exactly the same. So that's why I think it's down to the presentation as
The
opposed to the
presentation and
actual
the
design of
lighting,
the
yeah,
world and the
because
characters.
everything just looks so floaty in the prequels, and it takes me out of it.
Yeah, it
I
doesn't
can't
help
stand
the
watching it.
verisimilitude of the world, which is something that Star Wars built itself on. Almost giving
I
like
mean,
a
I
documentary
can.
style look into things.
Okay, well, how do you mean by documentary exactly? Like, cause
I would
there's.
say, at least in terms of the Lucas directed stuff, so A New Hope, the camera movements weren't especially dynamic. They weren't motivated in a way that was trying to make it as dramatic as possible. Like a lot of the scenes were kind of matter of fact and let more the set design and the costuming speak for itself. Whereas you get to something like Empire Strikes Back, where Lawrence Kasdan takes the realm. Not Lawrence Kasdan. The fuck is his name?
Irving Kershner.
Irvin Kershner. Yeah. Irvin
Yeah.
Kershner takes the helm, and you start getting more dynamic camera
Yeah.
movements, and it's more like close-ups
Well-
on characters where you get to see like the acting emphasized. Whereas I think Lucas was going for kind of a more neutral,
Well, I think
almost
like
objective look into the world.
I do know that Kershner kind of put a little more emphasis on kind of like I don't know, like kind of like putting together like those like shots, like, but I would almost maybe argue against like whether, and I'm only like arguing against this point because like it's a point that like Rick brought up in his video. Like I do think that the original Star Wars has a lot of kind of dynamic shots in it. Like like the thing that comes to my mind is like the X-wings taking off, and then like pretty much anything like in the special editions that he added in. So I don't really, I think that there are a lot of dynamic shots too. Like also like the way that the Death Star is like first shown and things like that. I think there are a lot of
Yeah,
like
I get what
moments.
you're saying. I don't think documentary is the right term, but there's definitely a difference in the directing style compared
Yeah,
to
there's more. I mean, I think like it's a documentary just in the sense of like he likes to have like background characters kind of like inhabit spaces and kind of like different things to go on.
Yeah.
Like kind of like within the frame, within the scene, and I think that it's like it's an interesting approach, but I think that like when I was watching something like Rick's video or kind of like thinking back to it, I mean, I mean, I didn't like in my head, I didn't like fight the whole like proclamation that it was that it's like a documentary so much as I fought the idea that it's like a silent film. Because what on earth is that supposed to mean? Because I mean, like you can kind of like emulate certain, because that's another thing that was kind of like argued is that like these films are made to be silent films, and that's something that I've noticed. I've seen like some prequel apologists say since like Rick's video.
The
and-
only thing that makes sense to me in regards to them being like silent films is that you can watch with the dialogue off and just listen to the music. And because the music is so motivating and evocative of the overall story that isn't necessarily conveyed with the dialogue, you can get pretty much the full experience that way. And I would
Yeah,
agree with
but
that.
but not the prequel, not the prequels, because there's all that like political stuff that you can barely follow with the dialogue on.
Yeah.
Like, so I
True. And there's not really music during those scenes either.
yeah, and that's something that I think like you know he was arguing in his video is just like, oh well, you can watch this as like a silent film, you can turn off the dialogue
Yeah,
and
it
get
sounds
or
like he ran
put it,
with that
I
idea.
guess
Put
you
it
could
on
say
another
that the style
language,
of the
it's like-
prequels has no substance to it. It's very bland.
Good one.
Nah, I think no, I think like I think there is definitely kind of like intention behind like how he like put together
yeah.
the films, but I also do think that there is like maybe some areas where he might have been like a little over his head at times, and maybe not necessarily realizing because he's so focused on the big picture they may not always like realize kind of like certain like things that got lost along the way.
Yeah.
And that's I mean in fairness I say that because I feel like when I was making my video that's kind of like the issue I have with my video now is that I think that I was trying to do too much, and as a result it kind of made the thing suffer a little bit.
Interesting. Yeah, I think that definitely happened with Lucas because compared to the original trilogy, in the prequel trilogy, he's having to spin a lot more plates, being writer, director, editor for every single one of those films.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that it's like because for example you can keep saying like, oh, this planet is in turmoil, but it's like, okay, but you're not really showing this
Yeah,
so much.
exactly.
You only see like the battle droids kind of raid the palace, but then it's like after that you don't see like
Yeah.
how people are starving.
And
it's
he
like, so
did
what
this in the original trilogy, like that scene in A New Hope where Tarkin comes in and says, "I've just received word that the Emperor has dissolved the Senate permanently," and that's fine because that's not the main focus of those movies.
Oh,
It's
what
just
does that
background
mean?
world building.
Yeah.
This is the problem. You
Oh.
may be like, well, what does that actually mean in the context of that movie? But because the movie doesn't rely on that, it's not so much of an issue as it is in the prequel trilogy, where the Senate being corrupt, there being turmoil across the galaxy is very key to the
think-
driving conflict of those films, and yet it's
Well,
just all off screen.
I think back in '77 when he made that movie, he also probably was just trying to justify kind of like the Death Star using like full force, right, on the
That's
planet.
also true, yeah. It
Yeah,
does, it does help do that
I think
as well.
I think it was just to establish that, really.
Where the Empire has now switched from trying to have any pretense of government to ruling purely by fear. Yeah.
Yeah, they fully transitioned to a military dictatorship.
Yeah, pretty much like that. I think that's kind of what's trying to convey there, and you don't really need a whole lot of stuff. But I think but on the point, but I feel like there's like a lot of moments like in the prequels where you really not only need to have like the dialogue on, but you also need to focus on the dialogue in order to make sense of it. Because when I just watch it and when I think about it more critically, I can tell you exactly what's going on in Attack of the Clones. But after not seeing it for a few months, because I like the whole stuff with Sifo Dyas, like at some point it gets a little confusing. At some point,
so
at some
baffling.
Yeah.
at some point
Yeah.
it gets a little confusing, and then like I think it probably makes sense when you really think about it, but it's hard to really think about it sometimes.
The assassination part alone is just I can't wrap my head around it. It doesn't make any sense to
I
me.
still don't know what any of Palpatine's intentions in that movie were. It is so confusing
think
to
it's-
tell where Palpatine's plan begins and ends.
Well, I think like the whole idea with that movie in general. I mean, the specifics of the conspiracy is where my head gets a little kind of like starts hurting a little bit. But I think like the his general plan is to orchestrate a war because like the separatists are kind of like building like kind of like or like the separatist like force is kind of building against the Republic, and the Republic needs to stop this threat of people leaving, and basically they use military force, and he's trying to gain power. The whole war is orchestrated to kind of like put him in a higher position of power, which I find kind of interesting, more conceptually.
Yeah, definitely.
And I actually would argue that I think like it's conveyed pretty.
I definitely
I would-
thought that was his goal.
I think
more just the
yeah,
execution that's the issue.
right,
his
but
actual
then
plan.
the specifics of the conspiracy about like does like who's Sifo Dyas, and like and there's Tyranus and there's Jango Fett, and
He's
then
giving
there's the whole
too much
cloning.
away to the Jedi to
There's-
make them suspicious, and they don't act on it, which is frustrating.
There's so much, and it's kind of like okay. At some point, it just you kind of. I don't really blame like if we're supposed to like just judge the film based off of like how good like how well somebody's able to convey their intentions, then I think that you could make an argument by like kind of like Worley's own like kind of logic that Attack of the Clones at the very least does not succeed completely. I mean, like I think like I'm not somebody that really tries to like nitpick things too much, but I think that like if you're using that kind of logic, which I think is just a really like flawed logic, you won't necessarily always get the most results. He also intended for people to like the films, and a lot of people didn't. So, yeah,
I kind
I
of get what
mean,
you
like,
mean about not wanting to nitpick too hard. I think I only
Yeah, I
generally do it because I guess it's not really nitpicking. It's more I think about the experience of the person watching the film and how information is disseminated to them over time, and whether things are clear at a certain point. Because if you're asking too many questions when the movie's trying to get you emotionally invested, then you're just taken out of the movie. And so that's the part I would generally care about.
and I think that there are many different things in that film that like people can easily get taken out of the movie, because I mean, and that's that's kind of like just like the truth of it, at least especially people that were following Star Wars years before that, like people
Yep.
kind of like of like Generation Y and stuff. It's like, oh, okay, so now they're going in this direction. This
There's
is
a lot
not
of
how.
preconceived notions.
Right, and maybe and I do think that a lot of those preconceived notions can be pretty like unfair,
In some cases.
but
yeah.
but not necessarily in every case. And that's kind of, I mean, I'm not. I mean, at the end of the day, I am kind of like more on the side of like saying that the prequels are good, and kind of like I think they're really interesting movies, especially. But I think that I'm not really that interested in kind of being part of some semi-reactionary group of people that are just like
And you
so
don't have to
like
be, but
yeah, I know, I don't want
the
yeah,
partisan like discourse has created is that there's two sides, and this us versus them mentality makes discourse around this topic so toxic. It is literally like fucking political parties. Like earlier, you were talking about how initially they were really accepting, but then you said well, like one point of criticism and they turned on you. Like that's fucking politics in a nutshell. It's so bad.
Oh yeah, I've had people like follow me on Twitter and then unfollow me. I mean,
Yeah,
it's just
exactly. It's just the same
it's just
shit.
like come on. I'm just like literally, I've always been kind of like open to criticism. I just was more interested in talking about. Well, I mean, I think at the end of the day, what I was trying to convey with that video was kind of like how like Lucas is constructing these like images and sort of subverting them. But then also, I felt like I was too busy trying to also respond to other media indirectly, and then also like I feel like I was subconsciously influenced by that hack. And I think like at the end of the day, like I I would definitely do it differently now. I feel like if I were to do it now, I would just kind of like, talk more about like, how he's dealing with images, and then just trash the whole section about the characters because it's like, yeah, okay, I can talk about the characters, but I feel like a lot of that it just becomes repetitive
Yeah, if you
and
capitulate it more like an analysis and almost like a post-mortem, I think it's much easier to get people to accept what you say. But when it
well,
comes to
yeah, well, I was able to get
ascribing
people
quality
to.
to something, that's when people get really defensive.
Well. In fairness, I wasn't really trying to make necessarily a case for like these being like good or bad or whatever. I wanted to, but at the end of the day, I was coming at it of like, oh, I'm interested in these because I like them, and that's why I'm not going to make a video on like Last Jedi, at least just alone, because I'm not that interested in it. I'm fairly neutral. I like things about it. I dislike things about it, but I'm not that interested in that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean that's kind of like where I stand in relationship to those films. So yeah.
What is your because I remember you? I think you mentioned this in your original comment response to this. What's your position on the whole like racial stereotypes in the prequels?
Oh, so that's another thing. So with some of my videos I made in 2020 and 2021, some of my goals were to kind of like talk about certain discussions surrounding films, and really push like the different arguments to their extremes. And but the thing is, so for example, like there's a scene in like Blade Runner where have you all seen Blade Runner?
I've seen.
I've
Yep.
seen two cuts of it.
Okay, so
Sorry, you wanted that.
Blade Runner, there's like a little bit of like more recent I guess like debate about this one scene where Deckard kind of seemingly takes advantage of like Rachel, the replicant.
I know the scene.
And I made a video kind of talking about like how some people don't read it that way and other people read it that way, and I was kind of like trying to assess like both arguments and where people come from.
Interesting
And that's
insight.
just like yeah, and then like I started doing that with like kind of like Silence of the Lambs is like Buffalo Bill like transphobic, like kind of like those kind of debates. And my goal wasn't so much to give clear answers in those discussions. It's more so to kind of like give people the tools to think more critically and then kind of conclude on their own. The thing is with the Phantom Menace video is that I talk about the kind of like the racial stereotypes, and I think that in that video I might have not done enough of a thorough and precise job at that.
Yeah.
And I think
that's what my issue was, is that it seems
yeah.
like you were taking a very clear side and not really adequately representing the other side.
Yeah, and I think that that's kind of like but I feel like also like I'm not really taking any side, and I feel like that's more like the problem kind of. But I mean, what I would say is I feel like a lot of people do bring up that criticism so passively to kind of like refute like Lucas or whatever. And they do, but I think also like there is kind of like some room for criticism of how you're portraying certain characters and kind of like that have certain likenesses that resemble certain stereotypes, especially if you're literally pulling from this old adventure serial media that was kind of racist here and there.
Right. You can inherit a lot of like
you can
outdated values that way.
Yeah, so and I feel like the character section really kind of convolutes like my video. So I think that what I was trying to go with there is that like the same like you can be successful at like constructing images of like like certain like powerful images that become inundated in culture of like what represent good and evil. Like because we see the Death Star, we immediately know, oh yeah, that's evil, right? And so he creates like these really like interesting images, but my point with that was trying to say like yes, but at the same time, when you inherit images, and this is in some way is kind of like a continuation of kind of like what Rick was doing with his video about kind of like meta, contextualizing. And so I'm kind of trying to say like, well, yes, but when you inherit certain like negative.
Anyone else?
No, she's roboting for
sorry?
me too. You were just
Oh, yeah.
roboting there for a little bit.
Yeah, can you go back like 15 seconds? We just missed what you said.
Oh, so in some ways I was kind of continuing like Rick's kind of like intertextual kind of like discussion, but my argument is that when you're pulling from all these different sources, you can end up inheriting kind of more negative traits kind of more haphazardly. And that's kind of like my main point with that part of the video, but I think also I would do it a bit more precisely and more kind of like nowadays.
Yeah, because as you say, it often gets brought up to attack Lucas's character directly, and a lot of the time it's really lazily done, where people, again, it's that stupid fucking self-evident argument where they just assert that something is the case without actually going into why.
But yeah, and that's the main problem I've had with kind of like Rick's video, not even just like the Star Wars video, but like in his different videos, he's fairly good at kind of like pulling together like all this different like information, but he's terrible at actually forming an argument. He's terrible at actually forming an argument, but because he has so much kind of like research and kind of like look at all this, but there's no like clear through line from that to the argument. Yeah, like and I think that's kind of like ultimately where like all three of his main videos kind of suffer. For me, it becomes the most apparent with kind of like the J.K. Rowling one is just so obviously like
oh boy,
an obfuscation of like information that
do you mind? Can we talk about the J.K. Rowling video a bit? Because I'm really
Sure.
curious.
Have you seen it?
I have not seen it, no, but I did watch Sean W's video on J.K. Rowling, so I know a bit more about like the behind the scenes and kind of the context to a lot of the criticisms against her.
Yeah, so what do you want to talk about exactly about it?
Just curious what his main kind of goal with the video was. He's asserting that what if J.K. Rowling was right? what does that mean?
Okay, so basically, I think like the Woody Allen one and like the George Lucas one, he basically is trying to make a case of like why people online are wrong about everything, and actually you should just like agree with like kind of the billionaire artist that most people in the world already love anyways. And basically it's his main argument with that video is that when you really think about it, Rowling never directly said anything transphobic.
Oh my fucking god!
And it's like, I mean, I can find, but then but every
I don't
single
even think
time,
that's true, by the way.
No,
it's not. I could get my
true,
friends Jeb and Sky just to. I mean, Jeb especially. He's got like a catalog of some of J.K. Rowling's transphobic tweets. He could probably.
I've actually considered doing a response video, but
that could be interesting.
Yeah. I thought about doing a response video, but that video actually is not nearly as popular as I thought it would be, like the Woody Allen one was. So I haven't really been too compelled. But but that's actually kind of like, but like even like up to the point where he was like releasing the video, he always wanted to know my takes on everything. It's like, dude, come on, stop. And but every time it's just like, well, actually you're wrong because like, dude, I don't care about the author of Harry Potter. I just don't. and that's what it comes down to. But basically he's kind of like, oh well, actually she's not transphobic because in my opinion these excluding trans people from access to kind of women's spaces isn't actually that bad. It's like, dude, come on.
See, that's
Dude.
interesting. Did you already have that like political opinion beforehand, or is it informed by the fact that J.K. Rowling has it and that he just puts the author on
I
such a
think-
pedestal
I
that he
think-
ends up inheriting the beliefs as well?
I think he gets way too consumed with kind of like the way that like Twitter or YouTube or whatever website, Reddit or whatever kind of like reacts to somebody that he's fond of, because
So it's kind of
with-
contrarianism in a way.
Oh well, but in some ways it's also like, oh, hey, why are all these kids saying these things about my about one of my favorite directors, you know, or authors, and it's kind of like he just kind of wants to prove that why these people are wrong about anything and everything, and it's just like, dude,
It's so dangerous. That's
No.
such a bad mindset, and it can lead to some
No, it's-
dark places, as you've just pointed
well,
out.
yeah, and it's like,
It's an uncritical
I-
mindset.
oh, it's a very, I feel like that's the thing. I feel like he's extremely like close-minded about like a lot of things, and we would have like some conversations before where I thought he was listening to me, but in reality he was just trying to like jot down notes about like how to respond to somebody. And no, it is like, it was really kind of like, it was really
That's so
kind of gross.
backwards. If you want to adequately like respond to the opposition, how about you understand where they're coming from first instead of just
Well,
being
yeah,
like,
that's
oh,
kind
they said this.
Well, yeah, then he basically
I just want
he really does.
I just want to point out something funny. You're asking a Star Wars Prequels fan to understand the opposition before he makes a response. Just think about why that might be funny for a second.
Well, yeah, I mean, I gotcha. I can definitely see why you may have just assumed that I would be like, I don't know, some like.
Like I said at the
Asshole.
start of the
Asshole
stream,
or
there was a
something.
reason why we were
People do when you
automatically
recommend.
antagonistic towards you from the get-go.
Oh
There's
no,
a
it's
very
fine.
good reason for that.
It's fine. I think like by the time you made that video, I was already kind of having some like thoughts on my video. But but yeah. So basically, wait, where was I going with that? Something about.
I'm sorry that I
No, you're
detract.
good. No, you're good.
Rick was jotting down notes of what you said instead of actually taking on board your opinion.
Well, yeah, well, that's kind of, yeah, that's what it seemed like. It seemed like he just was. He's also seemed to try to see like, okay, what's the acceptable thing about like the kind of like my supposed trans friends? Like, what would they say about this or that? Or kind of like, okay, how much should I?
What would be
What-
the thing
what
that
can-
gets
what
him
can I
into
get
the
away
least
with?
amount of trouble
Fucking
online?
weird.
Oh, I feel like he's kind of
What
annoyed with kind of like.
weasel.
He's really annoyed. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Absolutely. That's why, like, and because I don't plan to ever talk to him again. I am totally fine with like, not being nice about him. I'm not gonna like go too much in detail about some things, but yeah,
it's
he was
only with what you're comfortable
he was
with.
very he's very stubborn, and I think at the end of the day, he just is kind of like a little bit reactionary, a little bit transphobic, and a little bit narcissistic. And I think that can really come across throughout his work, and kind of like the inability to understand why people actually disagree with him,
Yep.
beyond just reducing them down to like, well, obviously they're wrong because they're stupid.
Well, I mean, that's kind of
know,
like
I'm-
what we were seeing with
Yeah, good
Anomaly
point.
Inc., where people just like them, like Rick Worley, they just surround themselves with a fan base of just yes men. They don't like listening to alternative perspectives, and the moment they get one from people that don't share their outlook, they immediately lambast these people as liars, like they're trying to get at
pruned
them.
out of the fan base, so you're just
Yeah,
validating.
As we said earlier, Anomaly removed me from his server without even like talking to me
Just-
Pure
once.
guilt by association, yeah.
Oh, so I'm guessing he would get mad about me too if he finds out
It's
I'm
not
on
a
here.
very productive fan base.
Oh
It's
God,
not a
who knows what
very
they will do.
inviting fan base. They eat each other alive if they don't share the same opinions. Sometimes they'll eat each other alive anyways if they share the same opinions because it's not to the same extent as the other person. Like, I mean, you've
Yeah.
got Lily Orchard who just released a video on what's her face? Reva,
I'm not-
and then she's like, Reva is actually a well-written character. You guys are just being mean, and no, I will not listen to people who say the otherwise, or say, oh, she only got good after so many episodes. She's just
Well, we've seen Lily's standards for writing in her own
They
work.
are not good.
no, they've
Not
very much
really
are not good.
I'm not sure if I'm familiar with this person.
Lily Orchard,
They
she's a Star Wars content creator who is
not just
very.
Star Wars, but
I
yeah.
only really know her from Star Wars. I don't know what else she makes, but she's a content
Just
creator.
general media analysis.
She's
like
a general
content
media
creator.
Oh.
analysis content creator.
Yeah, I
who's
haven't
Fairly
very
really watched
cool.
leftistly
too much YouTube
motivated as
lately.
well, I would say, in
Okay.
terms of her analysis.
I
Yeah,
mean,
she
I think like
sucks.
it's fair to employ, like kind of like, I don't
In
know,
a way
like
that
kinda
ends
like,
up obscuring the actual analysis, unfortunately, and becomes more
well,
about airing out biases.
well, I'm not sure. It kind of depends because like if you're setting out to like make like I don't know like a feminist analysis of something, like it makes sense to kind of like apply certain standards because you're trying to like how do we look at this text from this point of view, and I think
Yeah,
that can
yeah, I
be
can understand that.
interesting. I think it can be interesting, but at the same time, because I think like what exactly is the alternative? Because I feel like you will always, no matter however you judge something, you will always like apply some kind of standard or some kind of like methodology. And the problem
Yep.
with something with just saying like, oh, this is the objective way to look at it. Like, what does that mean?
I
It's
think
what
that
you
was more the
arbitrary.
issue I was having with
Yeah.
Lily's videos, is that she was projecting her values and her standards onto everyone else and
As if they were the
expecting,
correct one.
yeah,
Yeah.
as if that was the universal way to look at things. Because
I
I
don't
am
know.
definitely interested in a more kind of like
Hmm.
precise. This
Because the
is
thing is,
this is
she
my
didn't.
school of thought, and this is how we would interpret something like
Okay.
that.
She didn't only give her opinions. She didn't only like give her own thoughts on the situation. She gave her thoughts, and then interjected her thoughts by saying, "By the way, if you disagree with me, then you guys are fascists." Which literally happened in the video that we were covering. I remember, like,
Oh.
just clear as day. We
Okay.
all burst out laughing when she said that, and we were like, "What the hell are you on about? We're fascists if we just disagree with your opinion. You've done nothing to substantiate your claims,
Ironically,
but
quite fascist thinking.
yeah." And
There was a lot of justified killing of political enemies
yeah, I
as
remember
well.
at the end of that stream, we decided to read her fanfiction live on stream, and oh my god, the irony of her calling us fascists when she was trying to uh, advocate for the idea that you just kill your political party just because they disagree with you. It's like, what the hell are you on about? There's, there was no, uh, there was no mention of the idea of, oh, these people might share different values if we just introduce them to it, or just being progressive in the idea that you slowly incorporate different ideas into people that might be against. Nope, nope, just kill them, murderize them, get rid of them. Then that's how we'll get our own way of dealing things. And it's very indicative of the way that she just thinks about IRL politics, and it
Why are we ranting about
shows.
Lily Orchard right now?
Yeah.
What?
There's
I
a
think
real
it's
sense of smugness
relevant
to
to the.
Wait, have you just
because
been gone for like the last 10 minutes?
No, I know, no, I have been here. Just this kind of a
She was
weird
just
thing
reading
to go
the
on a
general
tirade
topic.
about.
That's where
because
we
she
went.
gives the impression that she knows better as a writer than the people she critiques,
Yes.
and she tries to demonstrate that with her fan fiction. And this
So
is
there
one of
was
my
basic-
least favorite things, is when someone looks at a work that is professionally done under professional standards in a professional context, and then rewrites it after the fact with the benefit of hindsight, and is like, "See, I can do it much better." And the
Dude,
irony is, in a lot of cases, it's
oh yeah,
often
Oh,
worse.
It was,
I've
it
seen
was
actually
so
not.
many
perfection.
prequel rewrites that are just, oh my god, they give me new appreciation
Oh,
for the prequels.
I
and
was
weirdly
I was watching the like I forget, I think it was Belated Media or something
oh my god,
with my
I've seen
girlfriend.
that prequel rewrite, I'm pretty
No,
sure.
it is okay. The first one I think is dumb because it's like, oh yeah, we should just meet like a teenage Anakin and then have him be completely irrelevant to the rest of the movie. Like, okay, like
Okay, that is definitely not how I would take a prequel rewrite. What the
yeah,
fuck?
and then like by the third one, it's so vastly different, and it's like, what is this? Why is like the farmer
There's
with
so
them?
many funny examples of just really weird shit people have done in prequel rewrites. I remember one where Yoda was the one that actually killed Padme in pregnancy by choking her for some reason. And then there's one where
What?
Darth Vader just walks into the lava, and that's how he becomes scarred. It's so weird. It's such a bizarre
dude,
rabbit hole.
it's so funny because I always see it's always people at
Oh yeah, there's one where
in these
Padme is a
comments.
secret Sith. Oh my god, it's just
I
it's
just-
it-
Fanbases vapidly
The secret
cringe.
ship, the
Shit,
secret
I busted
Skywalker.
Jar Jar Binks. Oh fuck, I forgot about that one too. Oh, it's
But
so entertaining.
but like, just all these people that you see in these comments for like, some of these like reviews for really bad like movies stuff, they're all just like, oh, even I could like make something better, and it's like,
Yeah, I
okay,
think-
good deal. You kind of lacking like maybe you have like better ideas. You're lacking a lot of the technical like ability
So
and
ignorant
skill.
about the creative process.
Yeah.
I'll put you in a fucking pressure cooker situation. I'd be amazed if you put out anything coherent, let alone
The only
good.
time I would agree with comments like that is if I'm watching something like She-Hulk and you end the entire series by saying, "Oh, I am actually going to beat up the god of the universe and rewrite everything from scratch." If I see something like that and I see a comment going, "I could write something better than this," I'll be like, "Yeah, no, there's a very good chance that you might actually, because this shit's
But then at the
just
same point,
bad."
that's a very low bar, and it's like, okay.
No, I know. The
I
idea
will
is
not.
that I'm, like, appeasing
I
to
don't
the
know if
comment
I'd
by using
agree
the
with
low
that. Even I feel like to create something like that, you have to have a lot of like technical knowledge and be trained and like have been educated on certain things. Or,
Yeah, you
like,
also need to navigate the
make
politics
it in the
of
first place.
executives and to make sure your vision
Yeah.
actually stays intact. It's such a difficult job that people do not realize.
It's not as easy as it's like, oh yeah, you just write down a script on a piece
And
of
then everyone does
paper.
what you tell them to do. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think people have a really kind of like limited. They also like focus so much on like the actual written script and not so
Oh my
much
God,
like how that would
fucking tell
actually
me about it. Yes.
how much that would apply to like the actual like I don't know, visual form.
Which is
Like
why
they
you'd
don't
be
really
such
think
a
about
shit
that too
fucking
much.
scriptwriter if you only cared about the script. The whole point of the script is to give direction to all the other aspects of the filmmaking process.
Yeah,
The
and
best
that,
scriptwriters are the ones that are aware of that.
oh yeah, I think I forget who said this, but there was somebody it was some director or screenwriter that said the best the the best scripts don't even make the best movies necessarily because movies are like made up from a combination of different things.
That
And
might be
like yes,
James
they should
Gunn,
have like a
because
good.
he's just said something similar like that on Twitter.
Oh, did he?
Yeah.
Are you guys like pro gun or anti gun or what?
I like him.
Pro-gun? I wasn't even aware those were positions.
I don't
like him.
know.
I know
I've seen
nothing
people-
about his political leanings. I only have seen.
I don't know.
Oh, I
and
thought you
don't-
was asking
I don't
like
care about his
movies.
politics. I'm talking about. Yeah. No,
Yeah,
we're
yeah,
just
Yeah,
like.
I like Gunn. I think he makes good stuff.
Okay, I was gonna,
I like him in non. I like his comedy stuff whenever he tries to do non-comedic. No, sorry, no, it's the other way around. I like his non-comedic stuff whenever he tries to do comedic. It's very hit or miss for me.
yeah, I just wanted to get it.
I'm fond of his work, but I don't think he's particularly great. I
think he
wouldn't put him on a
sucks.
pedestal or anything.
I think he sucks. I can't stand him. so I
He
was
might
just
be
like,
better in a more like showrunner type role that he has now with DC.
possibly. I don't know.
Maybe his.
I'm just so.
vision might be
I'm
good
just
overall.
listen. I don't know about you guys, but like I'm just so sick of superheroes. So sick of Star Wars.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
You know,
understand the position.
like it's like even like I mean I thought like the newest Batman movie was okay, but like I just am so sick of if they keep making more, I'm just gonna get sick.
I mean, they've
You
been
know?
making them for so long now. Like,
Oh, absolutely.
fatigue has set in multiple times, and then somehow they've still kept going. So I
Which
cannot wait for the day that we have at least.
Which-
I want to
frames.
ask an interesting
I
question
think-
for you, Jane. If you
um,
were to watch the same story of the Batman, but you remove the cape elements of it, so it's just a detective going around solving the same crimes Batman does, but it's the exact same story structure. Instead of him being Batman, his name is Bateman. It's the American Cycle 2.
Mm.
Okay.
Played by Christian Bale.
Played by Christian
Oh,
Bale,
yeah.
yeah. Would you
Okay.
like the movie more as a result, or would you still be like, yeah, no, I think this movie's still kind of okay? Is it literally just
You have
the
to
fact
use
that
it-
is it literally just the fact that it's Batman
I think that
that makes you go, eh?
yeah, well, that's kind of the thing. I feel like a lot of people are trying to kind of just like, oh, how can we use like how can we like do something new or different with these same characters? But the thing is that what I would point more to is like Joker, which I think is like I don't know, I don't care for it really.
You'll be friends with
Morbius?
Uvu very quickly.
What's that?
You'll be friends with Uvu very quickly. He's kind of
Oh,
an
yeah, I
in that
don't-
movie too.
I don't really. I mean, like, I think that there's some okay things about it, but like at the end of the day, I just feel like people are just like, oh wow, it's like Taxi Driver or King of Comedy or this or that, but except it's like set in the DC universe. I'm like, okay, and why not just watch the original ones? Like, what does it offer that's new, and really it just offers something new to like comic book films or whatever, but not really in itself.
In
I
the
don't know.
wider
I just think
context of films. Okay, interesting.
yeah, I don't really care for it in that sense. For the Batman specifically, I mean, well, I feel like scenes where like you have like Joker pop up and it's like, whoa, Joker's gonna be in the next one.
Well,
I feel like those scenes.
that's not really a fair comparison to make because that scene is literally at the end of the movie. I'm talking like the 99% of movie that is before that, like
But I
the
kind of get what
But-
Jane's saying, where it's like it's
Yeah.
still within the trappings of comic
yeah,
book film.
obviously, but
Yeah.
I mean like it's at a much lesser degree compared to something like the Marvel movies where they set things
I
up
mean,
midway into the movie.
I would say like I don't think it would be nearly as interesting. I really don't. I don't really find the movie that interesting in the first place,
So
and I would say that.
you if the Batman wasn't associated, you still wouldn't find it that interesting.
I'd probably find it just as much interesting or not, and I feel
Okay.
like, and that is to say, like I find it okay.
So,
I don't really have much.
so,
Yeah.
I'm just prying here because I do agree with what you're saying to some extent. So, you think that the reason why that movie is as beloved as it is simply because of the Batman association? Yeah?
Yes, absolutely,
And
absolutely.
probably the standards that Batman fans have at the moment too would play a large part in that, because the last Batman movie was what? Batman
Batman
versus
versus
Superman,
Superman,
Justice
yeah.
League. Good Christ!
Yeah,
I actually
people-
forgot about
those
those. I just
existed.
went. I just
Yeah,
went
I went
straight
to
to it.
Nolan.
Yeah, I went to Nolan's fault. It's like, oh, those movies were good. It's like, wait, Batman versus Superman. It's like, oh.
Well,
Oh,
I mean,
shit, Ben Affleck.
I mean, honestly, I even think like even the Nolan films always like rises. I feel like people would not like it nearly as much if it weren't for the fact that they
Well,
just like the idea of Batman. Want
Batman,
to see
Dark
Batman.
Knight
Nolan's an
Rises.
interesting case because there's a lot of diehard Nolan fans out there, so it's kind
I
of almost
do-
like a
Okay,
Snyder situation.
yes, but I would argue that a lot of them are Nolan fans because they're Batman fans. I really do think so, or at least that's how they evolved. And now there are people that like Memento and Inception and stuff, but I think that there's a lot of Nolan fans started off as Batman fans.
That was definitely
Okay.
the first Nolan movie I watched, so I can kind of understand that.
Yeah,
As
I
for
mean,
me,
like I don't
absolutely.
really think it's like a bad necessarily. I just think that's kind of
Yeah,
like
just
just the
more of an
status of that.
observation.
I mean, I'm of the opinion that I actually like Dark Knight quite a bit, but I think Dark Knight Rises and Begins I don't like them much
The
at all.
thing is with Dark Knight
Rises is
Rises
pretty
is
funny.
that movie especially is actually not well regarded by the general populace. A lot of people think that
Now
movie
it
sucks.
isn't.
No.
Well,
Even when that movie came out, a lot of people thought this movie is actually garbage or it's not very good. Like that's been a consistent thing throughout the
isn't
last
it?
few years.
Really? For the last few years, maybe. I don't know about the last decade though, because I remember when it came out, a lot of people
When
loved
did it come out
but they
again?
had like complaints. 2012.
Oh my god, this movie's a decade old.
Yeah.
No, since release, a lot of people thought that movie was kind of crappy. I just
Yeah,
I didn't realize it's been that
keep,
long.
right, but keep this in mind. Even 10 years later, it's still rated on the top 100 best movies on IMDb.
Yeah, but that's IMDb, and they give The Mandalorian
Yes, but
like
yes,
an
but
8.2.
a lot of people, still love it. Is what I'm saying. It's actually number 69, but
Well,
yeah.
Nice.
I don't
Yeah,
really know how to
definitely-
use that metric well because the general population think a lot of really bad stuff is good. It also doesn't look at like the broader population as a whole. It just kind of looks at people who gave it. I mean, Rotten Tomatoes, you would think,
Goodness.
this thing gives the movie 99%, so that means that 99% of people thought that this was a 10 out of 10 movie. It's not. It's literally just I liked the
Oh,
movie. I
no,
didn't like
yeah.
the movie.
Like
So-
what, a 5 out of 10?
like,
So people
literally,
just rate 6.
just like let's just say like everybody rates a new movie like 6 out of 10. We'll just say like all of them do that. It would be considered 100%
Yeah,
Rotten Tomatoes,
yes.
right? Something
Yeah.
like that.
Such an awful aggregate site for getting any like sense of consensus.
IMDb is a little
really-
bit better because their reviews rely on a number system given by the fans, and that kind of gets averaged out to a total score.
Yeah.
But you still end up with situations like where The Mandalorian gets an 8.2 out of 10, but movies like The Lighthouse gets a 7.6.
Yeah,
I think that's
I'm
more
reading.
down to audience appeal though.
Yeah, that's what I was saying. The audience is really terrible.
Yeah, I'm reading like the chat. I'm reading the chat right now. I see introverted robot says that IMDb is so garbage. I kind of agree.
Yeah,
I use
absolutely.
I
IMDb is
use I
terrible.
use Letterboxd more, but even that is kind of. I use that more because I like to kind of like collect like my friends' opinions.
But the thing is, this
I
But
is
love
why
letterbox reviews, honestly.
this is why we initially, when we like started podcasting, and the reason why we fell into groups like EFAP initially is because, at least from my standing, I wanted a way of looking at movies that I could apply realistically, that I could challenge other people's perspectives on and see why do you actually think this movie is good. Because when it comes down to just discussing movies with normies, I feel like a lot of the reason why they think something is good is so surface level, and when you actually push them further on it, they go, okay, yeah, no, maybe it's not that great, but I still like it anyways. And a lot of people don't like watching something like The Lighthouse. They think it's boring, they think it's cringe, whatever. They prefer watching something like The Mandalorian. But if you look down at, actual aspects of filmmaking, a lot of people will go, oh yeah, no, I could probably agree that The Lighthouse is better made, or that The Lighthouse, is
well,
Well, I
more
think that's
artistically
someone like
expressive,
Rick
but I like
falls
the
into
Mandalorian more.
the high art trap. Is you
well,
get the
so,
sense that this is underappreciated, and you want to be a part of like a group that kind of elevates it above the stuff that you see as mediocre and setting a bad standard.
Not necessarily,
ye-
because I feel like I fell into that trap initially with movies like what was it called, Homecoming. But then I watched Homecoming with you guys again years later. I'm like, oh no, this movie kind of sucks. So
Sorry, I'm gonna have to head out. Thanks for the stream. It's good to meet you,
Right.
Jane. Thanks for chatting with us.
oh yeah, sure.
Appreciate you sticking
Thank
around.
you.
You're always welcome.
bye, Uvu. Thanks
yeah.
for coming. Cheers.
Bye
Bye.
bye.
So yeah, as I was
Yeah.
saying, because I initially fell into the EFAP crowd of thinking, oh, Homecoming is good because it meets X and Y on X and Y standards. Then I watched it with you guys again years later, and I was like, this movie suffers from a lot of problems that I would take in other movies like Spider-Man 2, like The Amazing Spider-Man, yada yada yada. So why is this movie held to such a high standard again? And I slowly just started moving away from the group mentality and moving more into what do I actually think about this, and that's
Yeah.
just why I like my standard of looking at stuff.
And
Now
you
the
can
Well, yeah,
standard
and I
hasn't
think
been
that's a better. I
consistent.
think
I've changed my stances on quite a few things over the last 2 years, hopefully for the
well,
better.
as you should. Yeah.
But I still hold true to a lot of stuff that I used to hold 2 years ago. That was a really weird way of phrasing. I still hold true to some of the stuff that I held 2 years ago, but I don't hold the same standard to some of the other stuff. So
Well, yeah.
character-centric
I mean,
elements, I'm not as strict on anymore. I'm a little bit more forgiving for character flaws than I was 2 years ago. Um, but yeah, this is kind of why I like discussing things with people with different frames of reference, which is why I talk to Darth and Uvu a lot, because Darth has a very different way of viewing things than I do. I've got a very different way of viewing things than Uvu does, and we kind of like bounce off of each other. So why does this work? Why doesn't this work? And Uvu and Darth have changed my mind on a few things. I've changed Uvu's mind on a few things. I don't know if I've quite changed Darth's mind on stuff. I hope that I have.
I don't think you have. That's a weird thing to think about.
I feel like I have. We just really need to think about it a little bit more, but that's irrespective. The point is
If
that
you
you've
think of an
changed my
example,
mind on
let me
stuff.
know.
I can't think of anything, so give me a moment. Give me like a month. I'll
No,
come
no,
up
I
with something.
just in general. Yeah, don't have to, I'm not going to put you on the spot now.
well, no,
Yeah,
I
Sorry,
think it's
Jane,
definitely
you
good
think
to
so?
like. I think it's like definitely good to like consistently like allow for like room for like kind of like introspection and kind of like how we're like approaching art or what have you. Um, and basically just like kind of allow for like your opinions to change over time or to kind of like reaffirm your own like stances and kind of like based off of your own preferences. I think like it's better to like aim for that than to just like continuously trap yourself in like the mentality of there is high art, there is low art, and let's like try to like determine like what who are the good ones and who are the bad ones, you know what I mean? And
That's
I
the
think
problem
that
that
like,
you
That's
have.
their mentality so
well,
fast.
yeah, and I guess like I haven't really talked too much about like what I actually like about the prequels at this point, but I think like something that I find like really interesting about those films in particular is just like I really enjoy the editing of them, especially like in Revenge of the Sith. I feel like it's really interesting to have like basically like I feel like the Force almost becomes this meta textual kind of like thing in a sense where like you have like kind of like one shot followed by another shot, and it's particularly in like the scene where like Padme's giving birth and Darth Vader's being kind of constructed
Right,
with
the
like the robot parts.
juxtaposition.
Yeah, and I feel like the juxtaposition itself is almost like a visual confirmation of the Force, like in the sense of like what like the people are literally reacting to the other shot, and it's the combination of like these different shots that kind of
There's
creates like
a
this meaning.
there's another scene like
And
that in the movie that is one of my scenes in the movie that I actually kind of do appreciate, and I think was well done. Was that one scene where I think Anakin's it was during the Sunset of Coruscant, where it's like you have Anakin,
Yeah.
Padme
Padme's
staying in.
ruminations.
Yeah, like Padme's in like her like apartment, and Anakin's like in the Jedi Council room,
Just
and
got
it's just
the haunting wailing in the background, and they're just
yeah, there's no dialogue, and it's like almost like they're like looking at each other, even though like obviously
you
they're not.
feel
Yeah,
like the
well,
spiritual connection. Yeah.
Yeah.
yes, and you even see kind of like the geographical distance, but then it kind of like almost like ask of you to now see like both images like as like part of one, and that is the Force in the sense that it almost is kind of like montage itself. And I think that that's kind of like what Lucas is like maybe not completely consciously, but at least like intuitively getting at
I
with
think
that
Lucas
film.
is a pretty good editor. He did a especially fantastic job
Or
on New
well,
Hope
he
as well.
oversees the editing. I don't think he was like the only, but yeah, but he oversaw like a lot of the editing.
But
And
did
I
you
think
know that Star Wars was saved in the edit?
Oh, good
Oh my
Christ! I
goodness.
hate that narrative.
Well, it's like aren't all films saved? What does that even
That's
mean?
the point.
Anyways,
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, so-
Wow, Star Wars went through a regular editing filmmaking process. Holy shit, Lucas
Well,
is literally incompetent. You
because
nailed
there's
it.
like
Good job,
there's like
guys.
it's like these weird
Fuck's
two
sake.
extremes where one camp is like, oh no, George Lucas is like an auteur, like he's so good, everything is purposeful and everything's like good and amazing.
Lucas
And then
did nothing
and then the
into
other
that.
side is like, yeah, another side is like, whoa, the prequels are terrible. Like, how could the person that made the original trilogy make the prequels? It's like, well, what if he didn't make the original trilogy? What if it was everyone else who made it except him? And it's the only prequel. What happened to prequels is that he made them himself because he had full control. It's just like, yo, maybe he just like made good movies and then like made not
Maybe
as
he's
great
just
movies.
weak in some aspects
Yeah,
and strong in
maybe-
others, like any other human being.
Yeah,
maybe
Isn't that
maybe
wild?
artists are fallible.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe they're flawed, and it becomes a little interesting by seeing those flaws and kind of like
Oh
seeing
yeah.
like
100%.
I mean, and so I guess like what I like about like the prequels especially is like I like the form of them. Even if not every single piece always like completely like fits. I think that it's like I think like overall like those are very like interesting films, especially on a thematic and a kind of like formal level, and that's what I ultimately like about these films. But I'm not. But I think like what I want to make sure that I'm not doing, or even like kind of come close to doing, is making the case for like, oh, these are high art. These are like they're comparable to Citizen Kane or whatever BS like approach that like Rick. I don't even know what he was doing. I mean, like he was like constantly just showing like, oh, look at all these references to movies that I know about. But it's like, okay, but you're not talking
the
about those kind
opposite
of
of
movies.
guilt by association.
Oh yeah,
It's
it's
like the
just like
halo effect.
he's almost just like trying to like. I just feel like it's very like pompous. Like and I think he ultimately does know that. But I think like kind of like, oh, I'm just gonna show this film.
Definitely
this film,
showing
this
off.
film,
It's
this
like,
film.
look at all this obscure film knowledge
Well,
I have.
yes, but
So
at the end of it, at the end of the day, he's not making videos about those films. He's making videos about Phantom Menace.
Yes,
and
and that's
Attack
why
on
we took
Titans.
a massive
Yes.
issue.
Oh
with
my
his
god,
video
especially when he
entitled-
spent like 15 minutes on what was it, like a Bob Marley album or something like that? Oh my god,
Or
that
Bob
was so
Dylan,
annoying.
yeah.
Bob
I
Dylan,
can't.
yeah.
Yeah, it's been a while since I checked it out, but I remember like when I started noticing like kind of these like a lot of the stubbornness and like the way he talked about things and things that he likes and dislikes. He has a very and I mean like I think it's fine to like have like a art philosophy that's not fully formed because and it's just constantly evolving. But I feel like he has a very like vague kind of like approach to art, and it's
Yeah.
very kind of it's just
Well,
like it's
I'm just
very.
Simplistic
missing-
yet vague, which is
I'm missing
interesting.
like I remember when I was watching that video, it's like I was just wondering like you haven't this isn't like a fully like formed argument. It's just like premise, like these movies share like these like symbolism, like this movie borrows from this other movie, and then it's like conclusion good, and it's like wait, I feel like I'm missing like half the argument.
Well, yeah,
Question mark profit. Yeah.
Well, that's the thing, and I even talked to him about that actually, and he's just like, well, I think I'm making the case, like people just aren't seeing like how great it is about it. It's like, well, what do you mean? What do you mean how great it is? Like it's like, and by the way, if you look at Last Jedi, there were shots representing other films that are kind of like
We
that it's
pointed
right.
that out
Yeah.
as well, how hypocritical the standard
Yeah.
was, and how
Well,
there's
I
clearly a
feel
double
like-
standard going on.
I feel like, and ironically enough, as bad as I think like people like him are at like forming arguments for why something is good, I think they're even at least him. I feel like he's even worse at forming an argument about why something's bad. He's somehow even worse at that because it's like okay, but shouldn't you be judging Last Jedi by like how the artist is trying to do whatever their goals, like kind of like fulfill their goals, but maybe in some ways it's comparable to George Lucas. Like if that is what your standard for judging art is, then how but actually apply it consistently.
Yeah.
And then when
Yeah,
it comes down to
but-
and then he's like, well, actually, he's not really the original artist. Lucas says, it's like, okay,
Oh yeah,
but
there's
like,
always some bullshit technicality.
Oh, yeah,
excuse
yeah,
really
and-
does the same thing.
oh yeah,
I think
and
comes
he's like,
from
well-
the association of like, oh, Disney owns Star Wars, it's like a corporation, so they just
Okay.
hire directors aren't like real artists. I think that's kind of where the mindset comes from.
well, I mean, Paramount is also huge. Universal's also huge, and great directors have worked within the
Fox
studio
owned Star Wars
system
for a time.
so many times. I mean, isn't like I mean, I love like Kubrick's films. Isn't 2001 like a isn't that like I mean, isn't that like made by MGM or something, right? I think like
Yeah, I
Yeah,
think
I
it's
think so.
MGM.
yeah, and
Yeah.
so
They're a necessary
but-
evil, or else your film doesn't get
yes,
made.
the more commercial films are going to have more commercial like interest like behind them. I mean, and yes,
Yeah,
I think
doesn't
Doesn't mean they can't
Th-
also be good.
Oh, actually, like on the
think,
topic of Kubrick, also like he made The Shining, and you could say that like, and I know that like this guy's like a big fan of like The Shining and Ken Kubrick also, but it's like, well, wait a second. The Shining abandons like the original author's intentions.
Yep,
So
yep.
what, right? So
Yeah,
what
and
is-
actually, on that topic, MGM made the Wizard of Oz to compete with Disney. So is it bad because it was made for that?
Yeah, interesting.
I just prefer that
yeah, 'cause-
like the original intention gets like brought over, like
Well, I
when in
just feel
terms
like
of
I
adaptations.
feel like I also just feel like the whole like auteur theory thing is like, yes, I do think it's an interesting way to look at films, but at the same time, it's not the only way. And then it's like, especially if you're only gonna do it when you like the author, it's like,
exactly.
what does that even mean? And that's kind of where I've always like took issue with it. Like even when I first watched it and I liked it and I was more positive towards it because I guess I was a little bit not necessarily always seeing all the red flags. I felt like there's even still some issues I had with it. And then the problem is I feel like that kind of video attracts a certain type of people. And then what they're really seeking out is after so many years of feeling so like discouraged about the things that they like. Now it's like finally somebody gets me.
Yeah.
But then every single time, and then he had like such a huge backlash about like hating on Snyder because some of these people like Snyder, and then they're like,
nice.
and they're right about like pointing out a hypocrisy in the video because there is a hypocrisy of application. But I think that they're also kind of feel weird because it's like, oh well, this person that agrees with me so much is now saying something that I don't agree with. This feels weird. I don't know how to feel because ultimately, whether or not, because like they're just so easily influenced by like YouTubers.
It's based
like, come
on
on.
Yeah,
agreement
and,
more
like-
than like shared values.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and,
it's
then
like, oh-
and then suddenly all these Star Wars fans that happen to be huge prequel apologists just suddenly are now interested in Woody Allen. Sure. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I mean, I just think they're just like insecure at the end of the day, and and that happens. I feel like it's a little more forgivable when the younger somebody is, but like I mean, like I just kind of started developing my own opinions as I got older and older, and like that's like ultimately like what you have to do, you know. And I feel like but you should still kind of like understand like where other people are coming from, and kind of without just being so dismissive. And I feel like half of that or maybe a third of that video is just like talking bad about other YouTubers. Just like, dude, come on.
Yeah,
It's-
he has
It's
the.
so
Just
baffling to
chill.
me because I'm always questioning, like, you're trying to get people on your side, right? You're literally appealing to, you're preaching to the choir. How is this supposed to get more people on your side when you're attacking what they're interested in and what they value? You're not establishing any common ground here. You're doing a terrible job at convincing people to your side.
Yeah, he
Yeah.
spends a third of the video responding to criticisms from other YouTubers, which are generally
I
really
think
bad
it's fine
criticisms
for
of
you to
prequels.
respond to criticisms made against something that you think is done well, but if you do it in such a manner
Yeah, it's
where
the
you
attitude.
alienate the people you're trying to convince are wrong, then you're not going to have a good time. Because something that I've been actively trying to get better at in my videos is trying to be more appealing rather than argumentative. A big thing for me with the way I did stuff in my earlier videos was that I was doing it for comedy, and it worked in some stages and it didn't work in others. It's something I needed to get better at with practice. But with the projects that I have lined up now, they're very contentious already. So I'm trying to be more appealing rather than argumentative for the sake of trying to get people onto my side and see things from the way that I see them. And
Yeah.
I found that the best way to do that was not to be confrontational. It was to be like, look, I understand that you guys have problems with this, but if you look at it from this lens and from this lens, your arguments are not that great, and here's why. And I wanted to keep it from I explained this earlier that a character by the name of Matthew Matosis was a big inspiration for my most recent video. Not the one that I recently released, but the one that's going to be made soon. The reason why I found him to be a really good inspiration is because he was able to explain things in such a manner that I found convincing but weren't confrontational, and I really liked that, and I wanted to try and imitate that in some sort of way. I still try and get
Well,
the
that's
comedy
good.
stuff in there, but now it's focused more on stuff that's in universe rather than me attacking people who think a certain way.
Matthew Matosis is so interesting. He just makes essays that like usually don't have any background music and no like flashy editing that you usually see for a lot of modern video essayists. But yet his like stuff is more engaging usually because it's just so like well written. Like
I think Matosis is
witty
great, and he
about it.
definitely deserves a lot more
It's
love.
probably
But I
more
think he's just
deliberate than you give it
stopped.
credit for, Whirvos. It's probably more of a minimalist approach.
Yeah.
Yeah. But when we were covering Anomaly Inc., that was something that I noticed him doing a lot. He would spend an hour recapping the movie, then he would spend an hour crapping out people who he thought were wrong. But when he was crapping them out, he wouldn't do it in a way like, oh, these guys are wrong and here's why. He would do it in a way where it was like,
Insert
oh, these
Yu-Gi-Oh!
guys are
Facepalm
wrong.
gif.
Insert Yu-Gi-Oh! Facepalm gif. Can you believe people this idiotic and this stupid made this comment?
Yeah, he's
Have they
so
not seen
smug.
real action,
First
real
of
life
all,
action
fuck you.
pro wrestling? First, yeah, he starts off one of his
Yeah,
arguments
that
like,
was like
first of
a.
all, fuck you. It's like,
Yeah, that was that was a joke that we had running in like our Discord server for a while.
Anomaly's like in his mid-20s to 30, I'm pretty sure. So
Yeah.
for him to be acting
Oh,
like that at
really?
this
no,
age
Darth,
is
isn't he the same
embarrassing.
age as you?
I don't know.
I'm pretty sure that's what we
Are
came
you
to
all,
like
like, in your
last
20s?
episode. Is
I'm
that he's the
only
same age as you.
24.
Okay.
Oh no, he was like 25. I think Anomaly's 25.
Yeah, no, that's not on. Not on at that age. Good God.
Oh wow.
He's got a very
Oof.
childlike manner of approaching things, where it's like,
Well,
you're no
it's
longer
a
invited to
smiley
my
face with a hat
treehouse club
and
because I
Yeah,
said
sunglasses.
X is
yeah,
smelly.
with the sunglasses. This really says it all, doesn't it?
It's like a, I don't know, it reminds me of kind of like a young homeschool kid that doesn't know about this trying to be cool around public schoolers or something.
Yeah,
Like
yeah,
that kind of.
was
I
so
say that. I say.
specific,
I
but
say.
can
I say.
picture it.
Yeah. I say that. I was homeschooled growing up. That's why I say that. So, and I've seen people like that. But yeah. But yeah, I don't know. I think that like it's better to try to like, I don't know, approach criticizing other people's work without like just personally attacking them, unless for some reason they weren't attacked. But I think that that's more rare. I mean, I say all this, but I think that
Or if
I
the
don't know.
criticism of what someone says is like directly relevant to the
Yeah,
kind of
but
character they have.
yeah, but I was also talking bad about Rick, so.
Well,
but
again, though, that's kind of like what I'm saying, where for the most part, when you're talking about media, you don't have to bring the person's character into it. But depending on the kind of arguments that they're putting forward,
his character's so bad.
yeah,
Yeah.
and I think you've made a good case of how his character is reflected in his work. So I think it's fine.
oh yeah.
It's not
Oh,
like
yeah.
it's not like an ad hominem where you just assert something, don't elaborate, and then kind of like poison your whole argument just with that.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Or calling Kathleen Kennedy like a bitch or something.
Oh my
Like-
god. So
I think the
As
thing that
we're
really,
getting
I think
the
the thing that
anomaly
really,
sets. So funny. I know it was mentioned earlier, but the whole like editing George Lucas's face onto like a person that like chokes Kathleen Kennedy to death.
genuinely
It's
unhinged
just like what
behavior.
is this?
I think the thing that really does it for me
Oh,
when it
wow.
comes to Anomaly and how he operates is he's actually addressed his behavior from critics of his behavior beforehand, and he seems to think that there is a difference between what other people do in terms of like character assassination, in terms of just being generally mean, and what he does is that he is providing a means of criticism, and he cannot do it in any other way, because if he does it in any other way, then it's no longer genuine and he's self-censoring himself. So that's the difference between what he does and what other people do, that he's not being intentionally mean, he's just providing criticism.
I've
And
talked to Anomaly directly, and
What?
his mentality essentially comes down to they started it, and I'm not even not a hint of irony in that.
I believe you, because I've interacted with him before as well, not through VC but through Twitter, and yeah, that's exactly the same sort of mentality that I got from him, where
Look,
it's like,
look.
oh, I behave like a dickhead to other people because they
It's
did it
just an
first.
eye for an eye thinking.
Kathleen-
It's so bad. It's so toxic.
Kathleen made a movie he didn't like, so it's okay for him to depict George Lucas and himself killing her.
No, not killing, just beating her with a bat senseless.
Oh yes, yeah. Sorry, just
Oh, that's
beating
okay
her.
then. Yeah.
Yeah, that's fine. It's fine.
I
Never-
still
never
can't
mind.
believe, looking all the way back to that original EFAP prequel debate, that three of the people they chose to do that were it was Glib, like Rick Worley, and Anomaly. I think like these are the people we've chosen.
The
I
prequel
actually-
dream team.
I actually did see some of that
Yeah.
video, believe it or
Yeah.
not, and I don't know. I feel like a lot of those arguments against prequels are just so mind-numbing.
They
but
were
also
so
like
fucking
the
bad.
defenses too.
They
And
made
then,
Anomaly look reasonable, and that's impressive.
oh, what was it? It was like, oh, how come the battle droids don't have force fields too, or something? It's like,
Oh
what?
What did the Trade
What does the Trade
Federation want?
Federation want?
Yeah,
They got
that's the
stuck in
big
that
one.
for hours.
Oh,
like,
they
somehow.
did. God. Oh.
Yeah, it was supposed to be a debate about the entire trilogy, but I think it only ended on the Phantom Menace.
And it was the debate was kind of poisoned from the start, because the problem is that the other side had to make an argument for why the prequels were good, not functional. And so people were approaching it from just like, oh, well, it's not broken, therefore it's good, as opposed to like actually, showing how they do something exceptional.
What's the point of debate? Like when it comes to that, I don't know. I don't think I
Publicly,
don't
entertainment,
trust-
and that's pretty much it.
Entertainment. Okay, so is it entertaining to listen to somebody for 12 hours debate about whether or not like battle
It
droids
can
should have
be,
force fields?
especially if you just have it on the
And-
background, you're doing something else.
Depending on
Yeah.
like the people who are discussing it, I think it can be really interesting. But that in particular did not have interesting people to
Particularly
discuss
when
it.
people go completely unhinged and get like really emotionally invested, that can be entertaining in a trashy kind of like reality TV style way.
I just want to
Yeah.
interject here. I've seen some HD images for the new Greta Gerwig Barbie movie, and it looks lit as shit. I cannot actually wait to watch this movie. It actually looks like a lot of fun.
Oh, the new doctor's in that, I'm pretty sure. Shooty Gatwa, who's
Yeah,
also in
I
Sex
see him right
Education.
now, and he looks fly. He looks like he's having a lot of
That
fun.
man has some serious drip.
He's got some serious sass. Unfortunately, the actor for I almost said Quan Chi. What's his name?
Oh, Shang-Chi?
Shang-Chi, not Quan Chi. He's in there
What?
too, and I'm not a big fan of him, but hopefully he does a good job.
Yeah, he comes off as a bit smug and arrogant. Oh, well.
Yeah, I mean,
As long as he acts well, I guess.
if he does a good job, it's fine. But yeah,
But,
I don't really know how much more there is for me to say about prequels. I wanted to
Yeah,
talk
I was
about some
about to say.
character
That's
stuff,
okay.
but the character stuff I'm kind of like on, just because I don't really care all too much. I mostly just see
I
the character
mean,
stuff as a means of getting to the OT, and even then the OT functions completely fine without the prequels, as you
Yeah,
would
that's
expect from
true.
oh
movies
yeah,
that
you
were
can.
made
Sadly.
30
Well,
years
you can even
beforehand.
just.
They're not very
Yeah, you can
integral.
just watch. Yeah, I could see it. I'm looking at. I'm looking
One
at what the
thing I
chat
do want
said.
to ask you, Jane, what
Oh
is your
yeah, there's some
opinion on
interesting
the
bits in the chat.
what is your opinion on the action scenes in the prequels, specifically the lightsaber fights?
Um, I think that I do think that it deviates a bit from the original trilogy, especially from A New Hope. But I think that I actually do quite enjoy like the choreography behind those lightsaber fights. But I feel like it almost just aids in creating that kind of like heightened like melodrama of
Mm.
you know what I mean. I don't really have a problem with them. I'm trying to think if there's anything that I didn't. I feel like if there's maybe one weak action, not so much a lightsaber fight, but I feel like there's one weak action moment. It's probably maybe the droid factory part. Um,
The
like
quintessential bad
Movie goes
Star
full
Wars
video
action
game.
scene.
well, I mean, like it's kind of
Like
fun. It's
slapstick. The tone is
I feel
so
like
weird.
I think that part's fun, but like
It's just oddly placed in the
like
movie.
oh I mean like it's no surprise that that was actually kind of like a later edition.
Yeah.
Like but I mean like I don't mind it. I think it's I mean I think I kind of like it for the sake of just like showing kind of like how these things are created, but at the end of the day it's not really that integral to anything and it kind of takes up a little bit of time.
Mm.
But yeah, I think like but I think overall, like I think the vast majority of like what occurs in like the prequels, I actually do quite enjoy. Um, I don't. I think Revenge of the Sith is easily the strongest of the three for me. And I think Phantom Menace has a lot going for it, but I do think that there are some issues when it comes to like tone, like maintaining like a consistent tone.
Oh boy, yeah.
Like I feel like on a conceptual level, it's quite interesting how he crosscuts between all these different like things in like the battle for Naboo or whatever.
Yep.
But it's still kind of jarring to have like
Jaw jarring even.
yeah, yeah, jarring. And when you have like kind of like these like Buster Keaton like antics like juxtaposed with a fight to the death where everything is intense and it's like yeah the
Yeah.
music's cool. Like it's cool, but it's almost like, but I mean, I think it's kind of cool conceptually somewhat, but it doesn't quite always work. And almost you almost had to create this distance from the thing where you're just kind of enjoying it more. Like, oh wow, this is interesting how this is all put together, but not so much on a level of like, oh well, yeah,
And then
I'm
actually
consistently
watching it, you're
invested in
like,
each part.
I can only feel so much. Like what?
Yeah. And then something
I
that I
just feel
actually
like they're
think,
just consistent between the two. Like there's just like a
yeah.
contrast between, but I just feel like just the contrast adds any like new meaning. It just kind of feels
Yeah, I think
fair.
Revenge of the Sith is really strong, but I think like I mean I think Revenge of the Sith is actually my favorite of the Star Wars movies actually. But I would say that A New Hope and Empire Strikes Back are easily better than
What I
Phantom Menace and Attack of the Clones.
what I want to
Yeah.
ask you when it comes to just entertainment or enjoyment that you get from these movies, what
Hmm.
exactly is it that you go into these movies looking for? Like, what is it about Revenge of the Sith that makes you go, yeah, this one's my favorite? I know Empire Strikes Back is good, and I know A New Hope is good, but this is the one that
Mhm.
sticks to me. What is it about that movie for you that does it for you?
I think it's really thematically rich in a lot of ways. I think that I think like you really are taken on this journey from like into darkness, and it's very like I think it's very melodramatic, and I just happen to like melodrama, and I feel like that's the one that does that the best.
Yeah.
Uh, And I think what I like the most about it is just like it has so much like almost like thematic texture to everything that like occurs. Like for example, like you have like all these different like scenes juxtaposing against each other, and this time around it actually like feels like there's weight to it because like the tone is more consistent.
Yeah.
But and I think that like it really kind of carries you on like this almost like I would say like this journey, but it's like I just think that like it almost like an emotional journey, I would say, because you can kind of get so invested in like the spectacle, but the spectacle is like supported by an interesting like the spectacle supports kind of like this like heightened like melodrama, and I think that in some ways it's quite simplistic and to the point, and I think that compared to like the other prequels, those ones are a bit more
There's no
convoluted.
conspiracy plot, yeah.
Yeah, it's not nearly as convoluted, and I feel like in that way it almost feels like a it's like almost like a neo-classic cinema in a way, and because I think that one kind of accomplishes a lot of the same um like thematic and formal like trajectory that like Empire's establishing, that I think that Return of the Jedi to Revenge of the Sith weren't really as successful at like carrying out. I feel like a lot of things I like that's in Empire I like about Revenge of the Sith as well. Does that kind of make sense or answer your
I
question?
kind of get where you're coming from. I would say my main issue with Revenge of the Sith in the style of like a classical Greek tragedy, compared to something like Empire Strikes Back, where the hero is noble, selfless, but ultimately falls because of one fatal flaw that is kind of both a strength and a weakness, which is Luke's attachment to his friends. Um, if you look at Revenge of the Sith from that lens, Anakin is nothing but flaws. He is hardly selfless at all. He is not noble in any way, even though the movie tries to trick you into thinking he is at the start. But of course, you have the problem with
Well,
all of the previous context of the
I don't
Attack
know
of the
if
Clones.
I don't know if selfless. Well, I don't know if I would say he's selfish or selfless. I mean, he's very much like in love, and he's letting like love blind him, and I think that's like you know, in some ways I do think that it's a little bit corny, but because like at the end it's kind of like
An odd
a what like
direction for Darth Vader.
a broken heart that kills her ultimately, right?
Yeah.
But I think that kind of I would argue that he's not so much like flaws. It's almost like he just overly consumed with attachment, in the sense of like he's afraid of losing her, and that leads him down this like really dark path. I think like the other two films do help contextualize things, but I think that you can also just watch that film on its own, and I think like
It
it's
would be
pretty
better if you
like
watched it on its own. Otherwise, you would be so jarred by how
possibly.
Anakin is in Attack of the Clones to
One
how he is in
thing
Revenge of the Sith.
I find difficult to sympathize with when it comes to Anakin is how quickly he turns and
Yeah, the
how
pacing of the fall is very off.
his relationship with Palpatine is a very hit or miss thing for me, because while Palpatine was like one of the only people in the Jedi Council, also not the Jedi Council, one of the only people on Coruscant who was like actually nice to him, I do know that he spends the majority of his time with Obi-Wan, and Obi-Wan is like his older brother. While they do fight and while they do have their moments of bickering, he is also the person that gives him the most support, just because he's the person who spends the most time with Anakin. He needs to support him in certain areas in order for Anakin to be an efficient Jedi, and he ends up becoming one of the best. So that tells me that something must have gone well. And I find that his betrayal of Obi-Wan doesn't have enough weight to come off as believable to me, even though he is doing it for the sake of Padme. I feel like at the bare minimum, he would have at least made an exception for Obi-Wan, and he would have at least tried to like, what's the word I'm looking for here? Appease Palpatine in suggesting that Obi-Wan can convert. He might be like one of the only good Jedi left in the Council, because there is evidence to support that he wasn't completely pro Jedi Council. I mean, his master was Qui-Gon Jinn, and Qui-Gon Jinn was infamous for being anti-Jedi Council. So,
Mm.
and Count Dooku was Qui-Gon's master, so it naturally just follows that there is potential for Obi-Wan to be anti-Jedi Council. I would have appreciated that at the bare minimum, but as it is shown in the movie, I am not a big fan of how quickly Anakin turns and how obnoxious it is that he's just like, oh,
Yeah.
Obi-Wan is such a prick. I hate him.
It's just
It's
like he didn't even try to reasonably one. He just goes on like an unhinged rant, like in that one platform Mustafar. It's just like what? And then it's just like, oh, you don't agree with me? Well, die. It's like wow.
If you're
And
not with me, you're my
it,
enemy.
it's like this like was a deep friendship that they had because of how quickly he's just like I have to kill you now. It's like you didn't even try to like, do
Obi-Wan's like,
anything.
you're my brother, Anakin. You're like, were you?
It's a well, I mean, I think that they definitely had like kind of like that brotherhood to them, but I think like the criticism of okay, I agree with kind of like oh, it's kind of like a quick turn to the dark side, but it's almost like he becomes like I think he's like almost acting on like irrationality. He's going to just trust the Jedi, and I think like Mace Windu basically willing to kill Palpatine, in the name of the Jedi, whereas before Anakin is hesitant to kill like Dooku in the kind of a similar position. I think that those are meant to parallel each other, where he had such a lack of like trust in the Jedi that he eventually turns against them. And I mean, people like to make fun of like the youngling scene.
Oh my
Um,
God.
and I get it, but I feel like that just aids in the whole like heightened melodrama part where everything is so
My
extra.
problem with the
But
youngling scene is that it's really weird in terms of the editing, because in that sequence where he is Lord Vader and he's slaughtering the Jedi and then he ends up slaughtering the remaining separatists, he sheds a tear when he slaughters the separatists, but he
not the
has almost no
younglings.
expression on his face when he's about to murder children. It's like,
well,
huh?
I think that's almost just like okay. In fairness, I think that they want to cut away from the kind of the implication of like killing children, so they don't show the aftermath. But I feel like after he slaughters a separatist, it's almost the final culmination of like he is finally putting like an end to the war, and he's doing so by and this is kind of like the end point basically because he's killing the separatists. And I think like he sheds a tear there. I never consider that as a possible criticism, by the way, but I think he
It's always
sheds a tear.
bothered me because I've always been
It's a
such
really
a strong reaction
It
after
makes
doing
it
that,
come
but
off a
not
lot
after the
more.
younglings.
It makes it come off a lot more cartoonish than I think the intention was, because it's like you're going from this
Oh, I definitely think it's like
mega
actually,
evil
think it's
bad
like
guy to a quote unquote compelling anti-hero murdering like the villains of the
Yeah,
last
I
two
think it just would have
movies.
been so much more emotionally effective if we saw like serious hesitation and regret and sadness for having to kill the younglings, as
what's
opposed
almost
to
like he
him being like
becomes a different.
stone-faced.
Well, the idea I guess he's supposed to like basically become another person, right?
But if that's the
Um,
case, then why would he shed a tear later when he's already kind of sealed his fate?
Not just that, but like he refers to himself as Anakin in this situation because he responds to Padme referring to him as Anakin. He responds to Obi-Wan referring to him as Anakin. He doesn't like then go, "No, I no longer go by that name. That person is dead to me. I am now Lord Vader," like he does in
right.
the OT. So he still
Yeah.
has an
There's
association with
still quite a
Anakin
bit of conflict.
Skywalker.
Well, I
There's
feel
no,
like yeah, I feel like he was not sealed as Vader until like he gets the mask
Until he's
put on
quite
at the
literally
very end.
sealed, yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I think in fairness to kind of like the it in relationship to the original trilogy, but as far as the tier goes, yeah, I think like the idea maybe is that he's continuing to go down that path, but like there is still maybe some level of hesitation, but he's already gone so far. I think like I don't know, I never really considered that as a potential issue. Same with the whole. I mean, I think the whole like turn is supposed to be like this irrational kind of moment because he just betrayed like the Jedi, but he also was trying to like preserve like what he saw as like the right thing, but he's also overly kind of compelled by
But the
kind
thing
of
is
You
that
say it's irrational, but there's still an internal logic behind it, right? Because you pointed
oh
out that.
yes, but I meant it's a rash decision is what I meant.
Oh,
It's kind of
rash.
like
Yeah,
because
okay,
it
I
kind of
gotcha.
yeah.
but the thing
It's
is
it's
that
irrational in the sense of like going so far so fast, I would say.
Okay, yeah, I
But,
understand.
yeah.
I thought you meant like just there was no internal logic. Yeah, okay, no, I
Oh
gotcha.
yeah, no.
But the thing is that you can't even really frame this as him doing something that he thinks is right, because we know based on the scene where he saves Palpatine from what's his name again, Mace Windu,
Windu.
that he's
Mace?
only choosing to be Lord Vader, and he's only choosing to help Lord Sidious because he views it as the only thing he can do to save Padme, and he realizes that in his action against Mace Windu in killing him, that there is no way he can actually salvage his reputation anymore with the Jedi Council.
Yeah, that's
He
a clever
own,
manipulation on Palpatine's part. I will give the movie that.
yeah, but the thing that I'm trying to argue here is that I don't see this as a means of him trying to do the right thing, more like a means of he's just doing the only thing he has left. It's the only option he has left to
I think
play.
that's the problem, and why it's hard to get invested in him as a tragic character, is because he lacks that nobility and that
That's
right cause. He's
oh,
always just kind of. It's been Anakin's like
that's it's very
personal
interesting.
goal that's hard to kind of relate to.
Okay, I will say this, and this is one of the reasons I wanted to go on Uvucast in the first place. Is I think that like some of the criticisms you're bringing up are ones I haven't really heard before. But that's actually kind of an interesting like kind of criticism of like Anakin's characterization that I hadn't really considered before. But I think that's mainly because you're saying like it prevents you from like really engaging with like the trajectory of his character in that film. But I guess I just never really had that problem of engaging with it, and therefore I never
I
really
think that comes
thought.
down to suspension of disbelief, where you're already invested in the situation playing forward, so you don't actually need to think about what's being shown to you. I had a similar problem watching the Raimi movies,
Well,
and when certain things were pointed out to me as a bit strange, I went like, "Oh, hold on a second," and I watched the movie again with the criticisms in mind. I'm like, "Oh, actually." This ain't as good as I once thought of it, because the suspension of disbelief isn't there anymore. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
So it might be
yes,
the same for you. It might
yeah,
not be. I'm not saying that
internal
we're now
logic or
ruining the
something.
movie for you, but
Oh no,
that
I
seems
think
like a
that's
thing
gonna
for
be
you.
hard to do.
No, no.
um,
I want you to enjoy these movies as long as you can. There's a very short pile of things that I actually enjoy now that I used to like fucking 35 hours ago. But yeah, I just that's kind of how it's coming across to me in terms of why you haven't heard these criticisms before, because a lot of people, they go from, you know, a- is this the George Lucas that we had growing up, or is this a different person? A lot of people who are like really stern Star Wars fans. I wouldn't really call myself a Star Wars fan. I'm just a
I wouldn't
fan
either.
of movies per se. So
Yeah,
that's why
I
I
wouldn't
am definitely
either.
a Star Wars fan. I'm across a lot of different types of Star Wars media. I'm big into
yeah.
the expanded universe, so I guess I represent that kind of perspective. I guess.
Which is good, because he's able to counteract a lot of the pro Star Wars propaganda that's levied against us, that I might not be able to answer and Uvu might not be able to answer.
Well, I
At
hate
least
I hate
Darth
the
is
idea
there
of a
like,
Star Wars fan as someone who just uncritically accepts everything Star Wars. It makes me not want to even call myself a fan because of the association that creates.
yeah, it's a
Oh,
big reason why I'm not a
yeah,
Rick and Morty
yeah. I
fan.
mean, I wouldn't. Yeah, I could see that. Um, yeah, I see what you're saying about it. I can. It's an interesting like thing to consider, at least like when I want to kind of like understand like why some people aren't engaging with the film as much as like I've been able to engage with it. And I
Yeah.
don't think it's necessarily flaws. It's just kind of more just like things that are like present in the narrative that kind of. I mean, I guess you could perceive them as flaws, but like
It's
present
the
in the
sum
narrative
of
that
its
kind of.
parts. By that
Yeah,
point where I'm
yeah,
watching Anakin fall, my verisimilitude with the world and the characters is already so broken that kind of all I
right.
have left is to just get entertainment out of the nitpicking. And I find that happens with me with a lot of films that I just lose complete interest in,
It's been
and that may
happening
be
with us
like
while
more
watching
critical than you
Avatar
would
Legend of
think
Korra.
appropriate.
It's,
You
Oh,
just kind
are we
of
gonna
give up at a certain
are we
point, I think.
are we gonna talk about Legend of Korra? Is that where we're going?
Oh,
no. I'm
I
just
would
saying that that's
love
been
to talk
happening
about Legend
with
of
us.
Korra. We just finished
Well,
season 2
well,
recently, and
actually,
sweet Christ.
I actually watched um oh just real quick on Korra though. I was gonna
Sure.
talk about the original show. The the spirit episodes are really bad, aren't they? or
Oh
the
my fucking god.
Wait,
the
you said the
origin.
original show, so are you referring to Lost Airbender, or are you referring to Korra?
For season 2, that's for sure.
Lost Airbender.
Holy shit.
Legend of Korra, okay.
Yeah, but in Last Airbender, I never finished all of Korra. I saw some of the last episode. I'm like, what?
Oh god.
But-
Yeah, I don't even know what's awaiting us. We're only up to we just finished season 2. Just started.
Oh, are you
season
watching it for
3.
the first time?
Jane,
Yeah.
can I give you a mild
After
spoiler
just
for
watching
something
Avatar: The Last Airbender for the first time as well.
Jane,
Oh,
can I give you a
last- oh.
mild spoiler for something that's just popped up in Korra that's just super fucking
Oh, that's
strange for
fine.
us?
That's fine because I watched I watched the first 2 seasons, I think.
Okay.
This
then
is like
wouldn't be a
episode 1
spoiler.
of season 3. The episode starts off with Boomy learning how to airbend in like his mid 30s or 40s. Just for
Wait,
some reason.
Oh, like it was
That
like
was
his son, Boomy, right?
That's the plot. Yeah. Aang's son. But Shandy, it's a little bit more than that. It's the idea that because of the bullshit that happened with the harmonic convergence in season 2, now suddenly airbenders have
popping
appeared.
up. Oh,
Yeah.
okay. Was
I
this
still don't
before
know
or
what the-
after
Korra's
I left?
problems, honestly.
I still don't know what the motivation of the villain of season 2 was supposed to be.
That is what
It's like-
frustrates me so much about Korra. It happened with the Mon in season 1, it happened in season 2, where you're like, what the fuck is your actual ideology? Why are you doing the things you want to do other
I
than
just want-
I'm evil and I must be stopped?
I
Palpatine.
want to bring eternal darkness to the world. It's like, why do you want to do that? It's like, I don't know.
So,
I'll
so I
become the
actually,
Dark Avatar.
yeah, I never really got into Korra too much. I just thought it was a very like weak like follow up to.
Funnily
the
enough,
Yeah,
I
it's
have
really
very similar
disappointing.
issues with Korra that I do with the prequels. I find the art style unimaginative and
Mhm.
boring. I find the characters just stale and reductive a lot of the time. I hate
Korra does
Korra.
remind me of Anakin in some respects.
She's a
I
good-
think
she's so annoying.
I think like okay, so I haven't like I said I haven't seen Korra, but actually like we're talking about kind of like looking back at things that we had liked before and kind of seeing all these flaws. I actually am that way with Avatar: The Last Airbender. I see so many issues with that show. And I was like a huge fan of it. Although I haven't really let that like harm my enjoyment though, but it's just kind of like I
No.
just can acknowledge
Did
like
you watch
oh
Avatar as a kid?
I did, yes.
Yeah.
Jane, you and me on the exact same boat.
Well, I
because
was like-
I
yeah.
also recently rewatched Avatar: Last Airbender, and I also noticed problems that I wasn't like particularly aware of as a kid. But at the same time, I still enjoy watching that show. It's still one of my
Oh,
favorite
yeah,
things.
absolutely.
It's the sum of its parts.
Yeah.
What it does well, it does really well. That
But
almost
what it
makes
does
those
badly,
flaws
it's
irrelevant.
like, this is kind of shitty.
The only thing that really annoyed me about Avatar, I would say, would be just the war, the mini war that happens in season 3, because there's like no planning beforehand, and how it plays out is really dumb. And
Oh,
Avatar
yeah.
in general has an issue of just people can't die because they're so restricted by their age rating that when the story wants to go in like a certain darker direction, it can't, because it's just like stuck at this level of
Yeah.
like violence, which I find really handicaps a lot of the sense of like stakes and tension.
Then you
at
get
that
some
time.
of like the better episodes of Zuko like confronting his dad and then learning that killing him is not actually what he's meant to do. It's the Avatar's job to do that. So instead
I
of like
really enjoyed Zuko's character trajectory.
I
I, think
did
that was really
too.
well handled.
His stuff is like consistently good.
Yep,
But
well paced
I
too.
think yeah, I think the problem I have with some of the show is just like especially the first season, like Aang has like no arc. Like throughout the whole season, not much of like any consistent arc. And there are so many episodes that are like very like I guess you could say episodic in the sense that where they introduce characters that probably aren't really intended to come back, but some of them do. And Aang just takes a backseat so many times.
I didn't get that
Um,
impression that the show would occasionally focus on other people other than the Avatar. I
Well,
guess I
yeah,
was
and-
kind
and
of
that-
okay with that because those people were
That
interesting and the
happens-
world they inhabited
yes.
was
they were
interesting.
also one-off, so you didn't have to worry about them too much until they came back later, like 2 seasons.
And they did just help flesh things out in general. Like most of it
Mhm.
felt fairly relevant that I didn't really get a sense of like, oh god, get me out of this filler, which I feel with Korra, which sometimes they'll just
Well-
insert filler while they're handling the main
Wait,
conflict as well.
You guys do hate the Great Divide episode, right?
I'm indifferent to that episode. I'm like,
the Grand
it's-
Canyon.
I thought
Yeah,
that
yeah.
episode was fine, but a friend of mine said that, and I feel consider that episode.
Hang on,
really
I'm
bad.
so out of the loop. I don't know.
It's like the
Great
two.
Divide-
It's like it's the big
yeah.
canyon has to escort 2 different groups across that hate each other.
yeah, that was mid.
I think like generally like Avatar fans consider that like the worst episode because it has no like bearing on anything else.
But I mean,
It's a
Avatar
pretty
fans
good
also
thing to be the
consider
worst episode, I would say.
Avatar fans also consider the beach episode in season 3 to be the worst because it's purely character focused.
Oh no,
and
that
has no
I
that's a
hate
good
that. I
episode.
love the beach episode.
Yeah, but I
Oh, that's
mean,
a
like,
good, that's a very good episode.
the thing is that I don't really care a lot about what the general consensus is anymore because a lot of the time I don't agree with the general consensus, whether it's
Yeah.
positive or negative. Like, I mean, the general consensus for Matrix 2 is that it's a bad movie. I watched it recently and I thought it was great. It's like,
The general consensus for Avatar as a whole, at least like with YouTube video essays, is like this is one of the best series ever that we need to always reference to like compare
yeah,
things.
I
to,
don't
'cause
agree
it's
with
so
that.
good.
The general
It's
consensus
like
for
it's
Batman the animated
okay.
series
It's
is
not
that
If
it's
you look at other
fantastic, and I
kids'
don't agree.
media at the time the Avatar's coming out, you kind of understand where that comes from. But if you look at it in the context of everything, you can see its shortcomings pretty clearly. That's
But
why
it's
I would
something.
only call it
It's something
good
where
and
like
not
I'm
great.
forgiving of the shortcomings because this is a children's TV show. But if I have to view this as like, quote
Which
unquote
people will constantly put
objectively,
it on that pedestal, which is like, all right, well, it's not going to come up favorably, but if you
yeah,
really want to
it's
put it
it's the
that
same
high,
way
sure.
with things like the Samurai movies. The same thing with the Batman animated movie
Yeah,
TV show.
exactly. We
It's
had
like,
Anomaly
yeah,
making that
you put
argument
this
in
on
the
that
Raimi video.
pedestal. We look at it while it's at that pedestal, and it comes up falling short. Where if you
You're
remove it from
doing
that
the thing you
pedestal,
like a disservice that way too, which
yeah.
is ironic.
We spend more time arguing for why Sam Raimi's Spider-Man 1 is actually good compared to what Anomaly was doing, but his video was the one titled "This movie is a masterpiece." It's like, yeah,
This is why you have to judge things in their context and according to what the goals of the creators were, as opposed
Right.
to just like saying, "Oh, I'm going to judge this like it's high art or whatever," and then it's going to come up
Which is
incredibly short because
why
it was never
coming-
made to be high art.
which is why coming back to the prequels, I still feel like they fall short because the intention there is to explore a world set before the OT and to delve into characters like Obi-Wan Kenobi and Anakin Skywalker, and
You
they
do
don't
not
do
want
it
me
well.
to put the prequels on the level of something like Legend of the Galactic Heroes when it comes to world building, because good Christ.
Like, I've only seen 2 episodes of Galactic Heroes, and I still thought they were absolutely fantastic. Like, I saw the one episode where there was like 2 factions on a planet that were struggling with resources and they couldn't afford
Oh, yep.
food, and I was like, oh yeah, no, this is some
And
stuff.
all of that is just like a maneuvering to turn them against the
other team.
Free Planets Alliance on behalf of the Empire. It's also very intricate. I really like intricacy. I like seeing all the different like facets of how a world functions from different perspectives, and that's what I felt was really missing in the
It's
prequels.
why I
and I think it would have
don't-
enhanced them greatly.
Well, it does suck to compare a TV show to a movie for like, because like obviously one has more time.
Well, then you can
of
just
stuff,
compare
but-
the TV show to a TV show. Attack of the sorry, not Attack of the Clones.
The Clone Wars.
The
Clone Wars, yeah, that one. Compare
Yeah,
the TV shows. The
that
TV
also
show
comes
for
up
Star
short.
Wars is quite bad.
Yeah, that one's a more fair comparison. Is a better example of like wasting a lot of time in terms
Yeah,
of
but the
like.
But
thing
even though
is
the
that-
mediums are different, you can definitely tell a difference between the approach
I think-
and the
I
level
think-
of granularity.
But there's some things it does I feel like the prequels definitely could benefit from in terms
Yep.
of like if I want to make a commentary on how like a democracy can be like dismantled, like there's obviously some things it could have done in the time it had.
One
it
big
just
one.
didn't.
Just tell me what the ideology of the separatists is, please. I don't
Yeah.
know what the
The
fuck they
thing-
want. All I know is that they're getting manipulated by Palpatine.
Money. That's all they want. That's just
It's the
money.
Trade Federation all over again. God fucking damn it.
They just want money.
But they don't. There's like a hint that the Republic's corrupt. At least that's what Palpatine says. And this is the problem. Every sense
So
of
Dooku
criticism
says.
against the Republic comes from fucking Palpatine. So I have to take it with like a billion
Well,
grains
Dooku-
of salt.
Dooku too, but
Again,
Dooku's
yeah,
a
but he's
Sith Lord.
and Palpatine's apprentice. It's like,
Like,
oh my
claims-
God,
I
it's
do-
like a regular
I
person's
do find it-
perspective as an
I do
evil
find it-
fucking wizard.
Yeah,
I do find it funny when people like use like Palpatine quotes.
It's
to
so
kind of, like,
good. They drink
to-
the Palpatine Kool-Aid
Yeah.
so
Like-
hard.
It's like it's
to-
kind of
to-
reminding
to-
me of the situation we're having now with Rings of Power, where you have a character like fucking Sauron trying to say that the world of man is corrupt and is but like not that it's not very good. And then you've got Galadriel like trying to drink the Sauron Kool-Aid, and if you're not a fan of the original movies, then you'd be like, oh, maybe Sauron's got a point. But then you go watch the original movies, and they're like, oh, he's literally just referred to as the Dark Lord, who's so fucking
he's
evil
like
and so
Satan.
corrupted
Satan
that
of
his
this world,
soul,
yeah.
his soul's attached to a piece of jewelry. That single piece of jewelry can end the world. It's that evil, and it's like, okay, cool. I really like seeing this alternative perspective from the
Anyway,
lord
sorry,
Dark
go
Lord.
ahead, Jane.
Yeah, sorry.
Oh, I lost my train of thought now. I was just
I
listening.
did it again.
Just shame.
Well, no,
Sorry.
it's funny because I know what you're talking. You brought it up, and I know what you're talking about. Where there's some people are just like, oh, the Jedi and the Sith need to be in equal balance because they are the same. Here's a
Oh.
quote from Palpatine where he says that they're the
Yeah,
same.
yeah.
It's
the
like, wait,
Palpatine
Yeah,
Kool-Aid.
it's like
it's
they're not the
like-
same. Like Anakin goes in and kills a bunch of children. I don't know they Jedi that do that.
Right, where they're trying to like prove the point that the Jedi are corrupt. I mean, I think that they're kind of meant to be somewhat. I mean, they're supposed to be like flawed people, right? That's kind of the idea. But I feel like making like using a Palpatine quote to prove that the Jedi are corrupt
He's such a
is
good
like
manipulator. He
you know,
manipulates the audience.
it's like using a Hitler quote to like to like prove that the police force is like corrupt. It's like, okay.
Yeah, exactly. Oh my god. I
suppose
don't know how they don't have the self-awareness to realize
I
this.
suppose a topical one for nowadays. I don't know if anyone yet has played the God of War Ragnarok game, but
Nope.
there's a character in there called Odin, and he's regularly referred to as a mass manipulator and one of the most evil pieces of shit. But he's also a character that you interact with multiple times throughout the story, and he manages to convince the main protagonist's son that he's actually a good person. And a lot of people take this convincing as just like concrete proof that, oh, Odin is actually the good guy in the story and he's trying to do a good thing and whatnot. When the entire context of the first game is you're following people whose lives have been ruined by Odin. Like, there's a character in the game called Mimir who was trapped to a tree for all eternity for being too smart, and you free him by chopping his
Certainly
head
sounds
off.
like the gods, honestly. That's
Yeah.
the Greek gods in a nutshell, even though it's
Yeah,
Norse.
Norse, it's Norse gods.
But I mean, that's what the Greek gods would do constantly.
yeah, and
Anyone
it-
who showed any slight
No, but, like,
aptitude, they'd just come down and fuck them up.
But like this is just reminding me of that situation because a lot of people were drinking the Odin Kool-Aid per se, and it's the same thing now with Palpatine, or as it already was with Palpatine, where they look at the clearly evil bad guy, saying clearly evil bad guy things to the main protagonist, and convincing him that his way is the right way, and like, oh, maybe he
I
had
think
a point
the
all along.
problem is that they take it at face value and they think that that's like an objective insight into the world because, and I think this may especially be a problem with the prequels because so much happens off screen and isn't shown and you don't get a sense of different perspectives, that when you only get one representation of the perspective, which is the idea that the Republic is corrupt, you kind of like take that at face value and you're like, oh, okay, this is the state of the world. And you don't think too much about who's the one actually saying it and what kind of biases and motivations they have. Whereas if there were multiple like ins to this idea that the Republic is corrupt, I think people would be more critical of it coming from Palpatine in particular.
Yeah, I
So
don't
in a way,
think-
the film is also kind of responsible for that.
I think Padme was supposed to other end of that, but we didn't really see much because we didn't get much of the actual politics side of things.
Well,
And
it's just corrupt in the sense that it allows for somebody to climb their way up and kind of exploit it. But
the only
know,
sense of corruption I
surface
get
level,
that
like,
I think
corruption there.
the only sense of corruption I get, like the movie is very specific, not even specific, but like have alludes to is like, oh, Newt Gunray from the first movie. Well, he's been tried in court 6 different times and has been found innocent each time. It's like, wow, how could that possibly be?
Oh yeah, Newt Gunray.
But that one's funny because like the problem in that one is like, oh, Newt Gunray was found innocent. The problem is that one's like, wait, you can just bring someone to court 6 different times for the same like crime? That doesn't seem fair. What?
I think like the best
Yeah.
example of just irony in these movies is you've got Palpatine expressing, that he understands that the Senate is corrupt with Chancellor Valorum directly to Padme, but it's the exact same person who ends up becoming the leader of a galactic empire who's saying this stuff. So it's like, yeah, you might be right in what you're saying, but why should I still trust anything that you say beyond this point? You got one
That's-
thing right.
That's also another point. I don't know if like the Republic is actually corrupt on its own, or if it was Palpatine who made it corrupt in the
This
first
Well,
is
he's
the
place.
playing
problem,
both
right?
sides, so everything that he says has to be taken with a billion pieces of
I'd
salt.
like to
because
see
it's like,
non-Palpatine related issues with the Republic, because it's hard to call it an issue with the Republic when
it's only from
everything
one
seems to lead to
perspective.
Palpatine,
Yeah.
who is literally like a wizard that has the ability to influence people's minds. It's like,
Like even in the first movie, he's already just like, oh, I'll make it legal. It's like, oh yeah, I guess he can. This already has the
Yeah,
ability to do
and they
that.
were like really hesitant to kind of like follow like his lead. Yeah, I could see that.
And all this would do is it would just aid in building a more coherent world. You're not detracting or you're not taking anything away from the story that's being told. You're just adding more onto it. So what we have might not necessarily be bad, but it's definitely lacking in aspects that can make it good.
yeah, it's a good foundation. It
I
just
could
needs
see
more
that.
fleshing out, which is why I think it led to such successful spin-offs and expanded
Mhm.
universe stuff that pretty much like kickstarted like some of people's favorite stories and most acclaimed stuff, because I think it is just a really solid foundation, and
Like
all of
that's
it wouldn't exist without the prequels. So I got to be thankful for them for that.
yeah, it set a foundation for other people to build upon, and they ended up making really good stuff out of it. So
Even the novelization of Revenge of the Sith, I think, is extremely well done, and I see a version of Revenge of the Sith that works in every aspect, and I'm like, okay, so that's what it took.
That's kind of what it's like about, but I guess like there are certain like ways where it seems like you guys feel like it could have been like conveyed in a more um thorough, or I guess like kind of like um direct manner, I guess.
essentially what we're
But
asking
Yeah.
for is if it was a little less melodramatic and a little bit more consistent with a
I think
world
you
that
can
makes
still have the
sense.
melodrama, and I think the melodrama can actually be enhanced by the believability, because I don't think melodrama necessarily means that you have to be vague on things. It's just the manner
yeah,
in which things are
I guess
presented.
I just never really saw. I guess I just never really saw some of this stuff as vague. But it's definitely an interesting
I
thing
think
to
it's
think
a
about.
matter
At the very
of
least.
kind of like experiencing other things that do it to a higher level, and kind of like
Yes,
wanting
yes,
to expect that for other things as well.
I think it's also like I think people aren't really used to seeing these movies in these ways, because the popular criticism of the prequels, especially when it came out, was that the politics were boring. Like you should have just got rid of them. There was
Yeah, and
the commentary was
they
like,
took that to
the
mean
politics could have
don't
been
Did in the sequel
improved.
trilogy, and it was
Like
fucking horrific.
it was like, the politics should be like improved, or like they're so. It was this idea that politics are boring in Star Wars. They
So
shouldn't
just
have
don't
bothered.
do
Which
it.
is
Yeah.
insane, because Star Wars is so inherently political. It's about a rebellion rising up against an empire. I wonder which side of the political spectrum that falls on. It's not fucking subtle.
Yeah.
Well, people have a
It's,
tendency
I-
to see things that aren't like controversial in their own like political system they live in as like not political. So it's like, well, obviously it's
That's true.
political in the
It's like
sense that
the
like,
normalized thing, yeah.
yeah, obviously it's political in the sense that like, oh yeah, saying that like authoritarianism
I actually
like
saw a
fashion
really
probably
funny
bad,
thing.
but no one in the US is like, oh, this is so political. It's like, well, yeah, like duh,
Except
like
for the people who are actually authoritarian,
well,
which seems to
actually
be
yeah,
saw-
so
growing
like
them out
for
of
the
them lately.
99% of society, it's like, oh yeah, it doesn't make
Mhm.
sense. Like they don't see it as political because it's like, well, yeah, even though it's like they even took inspiration from like literal like symbolism like of like, oh, like of these authoritarian regimes, like Nazi Germany before the empire, but then they try to make it its own thing as well. So it wasn't like, oh, it's just
I
sad.
think it does come down to verisimilitude, though, because when you believe a world, you see it less as like a political statement or having any kind of agenda, and you just think of it more as, oh, this is just the way this world is. And I think Andor is a really interesting look into that, because it is the most overtly political thing Star Wars has ever done, and yet both sides of the political spectrum seem to be appreciating it quite a bit, just because of how believable the characters and
but
world
that
are.
might really that's kind of interesting. But I feel like that might actually be. I mean, I don't know. I haven't seen it, but that sounds like, at least on the surface, to maybe be a red flag. Because if both like people on different sides of like the political spectrum are kind of like enjoying something out of it, that almost sounds like the show takes a little bit of a, I don't know, centrist stance or
Oh god,
something.
no! It's very anti-centrist.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, I'd have
thing-
to. I'd have
That's
to
why I
check it
find
out.
it so fascinating, because it's like, I wonder that. I guess there is more that kind of unites these people, or maybe they're just enjoying it for different reasons. Like, for example, you've got a character called Cyril Khan, who is a wannabe authoritarian, and you got people on the left who are like, I love him, he's so fucking terrible, and then you got people on the right that are like, yes, this is the kind of person that we need. And so they both appreciate his character, but for different reasons. It's kind of interesting.
That does sound interesting.
Another thing that I wanted to
I think
point out was.
I'm about to go.
Oh, sorry.
Oh,
Yeah,
what?
okay.
What?
Yeah.
No, go
You
ahead.
Jen. No. Floor's yours.
No, go ahead. What do you want to ask?
I was just gonna say that another reason why people on both sides of the political spectrum might appreciate a story like this, and I'm just going off of just speculation because I haven't actually seen the show, is if the show depicted both political sides properly to the point where both sides feel like they're being equally represented, and it's up to the viewer to decide which side is doing the better job between the two.
Yeah, pretty much. Each side kind of gets like the same amount of detail. Like, we get a good focus on what the inner workings of the Empire is like, just as much as the budding rebellion, which is what Legend of the Galactic Heroes also did.
An example of this kind of mindset that I think is done well is in a movie called Good Will Hunting, and it's done between two characters who are trying to get a basically super genius to stop being a delinquent and start pursuing a life that might be beneficial towards humanity. At least that's the perspective of one person. The other person is a psychologist who's been hired to get him to see that point of view, but he wants to basically just make sure that the kid lives a normal, happy life and that he actually pursues a life of meaning and of happiness. And the thing I like about that scene specifically is that both characters have a point of view that's not necessarily wrong, and they give very good explanations for why they want that specific outcome. But at the end of the day, it's up to the character in question to make the decision that they want, even though they're presented with two equally compelling situations to follow.
That's more true to life, I think.
Yeah.
All right, let's wrap up here.
Yeah. So Jane,
that sounds good. Yeah, I was just about to say I'm probably gonna go about now. So, but it was fun talking.
It was fun chatting with you. Sorry it's taken so long. I'm glad you've actually managed to come on and give us your piece.
That was a really good conversation. You're
do
a very
see-
reasonable person, and that is a breath of fresh air on this platform.
Oh yeah, I'm reasonable.
Like, I don't have to agree with someone as long as they're reasonable. I can have a great conversation with them. It's
you're
nice.
like a normal person.
Yeah,
a normal person.
A lost
there we
art
go.
these days.
All right.
I hope that I can at least see you on here again some other time. Maybe we're talking about something that's not Star Wars related, but I'll keep in contact with you from
we'll
time
see.
to time. But thank you very much for coming. I hope you have a good day and a good Christmas.
All right. Merry Christmas. Bye bye.
Thanks, Jane. Merry Christmas.
Thank you. Bye.
So, yeah, I don't know if there's anything else that you guys really wanted to talk about now that the guest of honor has decided.
One thing I wanted to mention on that last topic is that I think one thing that also comes with the whole like, it's both sides think is good. I think like if you have a show that's like, 100% criticism of one side, while the other side is like invalid, like so that's like all pure and good. People are like, this is so biased, blah blah blah. But if you like even if you just give like one thing of like, this aspect's kind of dumb on the other side, you're like, oh my goodness, this is actually secretly based and like all that. Like, because I feel like this happened with The Boys. Cause I feel like
I get
like.
what you're saying.
And see, it's still obviously like left leaning, but it took a bit before people like kind of realized that.
The Boys is terrible political commentary.
Yeah, but I'm not just saying whether it's quality.
I think some of it's pretty on point. Particularly its criticism of corporate wokeism or however.
My point is that was obviously. My point is that it's obviously less leaning, and I think it was that way from season 1, but people didn't really catch on to it until like later seasons, where it's like, okay, now like it's obviously biased. But even early on, you can see like, it makes fun of both, but it's kind of like more solid on one side than the other.
It was definitely
always my go-to example.
It took until season 2 where they had a character who basically said some pretty, level-headed stuff like, female characters don't need to be empowered just to be good characters and stuff like that. I can't remember the exact piece of fucking dialogue, but I remember the meme being that Stormfront was making really level-headed statements, and then it turns out at the end of the show that she's a Nazi, and now you're supposed to look at everything else that she says beforehand.
Absolutely was not making level-headed statements.
That was the meme that was going around. I can't remember exactly what the hell she was saying around the time, but this is like before she went into the more very obviously Nazi rhetoric kind of stuff. It was like in the first 2 or 3 episodes before she
Yeah,
actually
it's
ended up.
before the
I don't know.
reveal.
You have to be extremely like politically blinded to not see the red flags in that character from the beginning.
Sure, I can't remember anything because I was blinded by just boredom.
So boring have blinded you.
I remember watching that show with my brother, and we both really liked watching season 1, so we were excited for season 2, and then we watched episode 1 and 2, and we almost fell asleep fucking just in the lounge.
Yeah, I know. I didn't make it through season 2. I just got
It
bored
was
halfway through
so
and dropped it.
lame. And then I watched season 3 with Conway like a couple weeks ago, and it was like, oh my fucking... You just got a
Yeah, season
man
3 was
entering the urethra of
miserable.
another man because he can shrink really small, and that's the gist of episode 1 because he goes
It's
kablooey. And it's like, oh, you serious? You're
God,
either
they
lame or gruesome.
I'm not a fan of the boys. The
Yeah.
boys is like the most mature show I've ever seen.
Yeah, pretty
Some way to
much.
describe it.
But
Yeah, sometimes
yeah,
I feel
I
like
think
the
there's
humor
more
of
merit to the boys than you'd maybe give it credit for, but I also understand the criticisms.
I
I
was-
don't
I
really
was-
know how I feel about the show overall because it is very hit or miss for me.
I was very attached to just the base concept of like normal people having to like take down superheroes and like how terrifying it was in season
Yeah,
1.
that's
Like
that's
I
what
remember
I
that
found
one
Yeah, that
scene.
was some very strong stuff.
Like that one scene in particular, I always remember where they're hiding out and Homelander's leaders are looking for them. It's just like, what if this guy finds them? Like, what the fuck
Well,
did
I
he
remember them
do?
even
Yeah,
encountering
that was
I can't remember his name, the one who always wears a mask. I remember that
Black
fight
Noir.
being
Noir.
like very harrowing because it was like, holy fuck, they're doing like nothing against him. He could kill them all so easily.
But
Yeah, but,
I find that really compelling stuff. And then you have season 3
Yeah.
introducing the boys having superpowers, and it's like, no, you're removing like the one element of the show that I actually liked in season 1.
But
You
is
can't
it?
keep doing that. That's kind of the problem. Is it worked in season 1, but it's a hard thing to kind of sustain over a period of time.
Yeah, for me,
Yeah,
it's
I
just like
disagree. You can go so much further with a concept like this, and you can have characters like just outsmarting villains and doing interesting stuff. And I mean, getting someone like Soldier Boy in who can basically nuke superheroes was a good idea until they incorporate that alongside the idea that he's also Homelander's dad, and then you have the superhero boys, and it's like, oh, this is getting super messy now.
I had no context for anything you're saying. It sounds all over the
It's
place.
so
But,
stupid, Whirvos.
I don't see any issue with him being Homelander's dad. I think
It
that
made it
adds an interesting
very.
wrinkle into Homelander's character because
It
he was
might
always
have
like
been
looking
interesting
up
if they had
to.
more to work with, but they introduced it at like the second to last episode, which meant that there was no room for that story to develop. It was literally an out
Yeah,
of
and
nowhere thing.
and then they
but-
put Soldier Boy on ice before they can fucking do anything.
Yeah.
They might bring him back, but I don't fucking know if they'll bring him
but
back or not.
but for me, it was just like I like the that base idea, but I always feel like the humor just kind of took away from it, especially in season 2, where it felt like so much time was spent on these like side thoughts and like humorous moments. I just like the
The
original
stuff with the
concept that
deep
drew me
felt
in. It felt like it
particularly
was in the
pointless.
background.
I know they're trying to do a Scientology thing, but it didn't end up being very relevant to the main thrust of the season, from what I can remember.
Wait, which stuff?
The Deep's whole thing with that church.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Scientology
That's
Oh,
why
that
that was
thing.
that's what I was thinking of in particular in season 2. I remember like the Deep's whole everything added to the Deep didn't feel irrelevant to anything else, and just like, oh, time for a nerd humor section with the
Anytime
Deep.
they
And
try
I'm
and
like,
do
I don't
stuff with the
care.
Deep, it's just pretty much along the lines of, man, this character sure is shitty and bad things are happening to him, huh? It's like I don't feel like there's an endpoint for this character.
Honestly,
He just
I had
goes
it.
somewhere, I guess.
I had the same feeling watching in the recent Korra season. Whenever I went back to Tenzin's group, I was like, I don't care about Tenzin's group. This is not relevant. Please go back
It
to back
was-
what's actually happening.
I would say with the Deep, it starts as like, oh, where's this going? And then it ends with, haha, isn't he a loser? And that's the joke.
I don't think it's more haha. In that moment, it's just kind of like, ooh, he got like what happened to him, but I don't know if I feel good about this because this also feels horrible, and it
Wait,
kind
are
of
you
puts you
talking
in a
about
very
season 1
interesting
deep or
moral
season
position.
3 deep?
I'm
Season
talking
1
about
deep.
like season
okay.
2 onward with deep.
Well,
I
talking about
think
different
I,
deeps.
Wow.
I,
Okay. No,
I
no,
think
we're not on the
season
same
one
page.
handled. I think season 1 handled it the best, but yeah, I think
Yes.
after that it just kind of
That
goes
felt
on.
like a complete arc, but then they don't really know
Yeah,
what to do with him.
season 2 and 3 just kind of want to keep punishing him because he's the punching bag, and it's not
He
very
honestly
funny.
should just be written out of the show at this
He's
point.
the Jerry of
I
the
don't see
boys.
anything more to
The
do.
Jerry, dude.
That's what he is. The deep
Anyways.
is the Jerry. Changed my mind.
Anyway,
Okay, we went on
prequel
a boys'
discussion,
rant.
guys.
Yeah, we went on a boys' rant, but that was the point I wanted to make. Is that I think that's why where the both sides of pre thing comes from, even if
Yeah,
it's trying to
that's a
be
good
more critical.
example. All right,
Yeah.
well, we'll wrap it up here. Thanks everyone
Yes.
for watching.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for
For
watching.
those
Hope you enjoyed our discussion with Jane. I know I did. That was a
I
nice
did.
change of pace.
For those of you who are interested in checking out Jane's channel, I have linked it in the description. I've also linked our initial coverage of Jane's video in the description as well, when we covered her on Uvucast several months ago. If you guys are interested in content like this, I've done streams with 2 of the guests that I've had on here beforehand, or hosts, or whatever the fuck the term is, I don't know. Hope you guys enjoyed, and I shall see you next time.
Thank you for having me on.
Have a
And
good weekend.
Oh
all.
yeah, nope. Thanks for Kamui and Whirvos coming on. They will appear
I
again
guess I'll
in.
go fuck myself then.
I mean, you've been on here fucking 3 times beforehand. This is like their first time on here. Jesus Christ, Darth.
Yeah, but I love it when you validate me.
Thank you very much for Mando Crusher coming on. I really appreciate his
Fuck is
input and
that?
assistance, and I really like the fact that he was able to have a consistent conversation with Jane on topics that I might not have actually have been able to contribute to. There was definitely stuff that I had like absolutely nothing to say, so I just kept quiet. So thank you
Greg
for
Darth
that.
was like 30% of speaking time. I'm gonna be honest.
40.
Wait, 30%? That's like nothing. It's
Sorry,
like
I
40.
feel like he was like 40%. Jane was like 30, and then the rest is like muddled between the 4 of us.
I just found it a really interesting to talk to and lots of
No,
topics.
that's
we were
all
able
good.
to
Yeah, it's
end
fine.
on. It was good.
That's all good.
I did
But-
try and steer it back to the main topic though, because I did notice that at times I was talking about stuff where you guys were like,
Oh,
yeah.
I wonder
noticed
how
that
far
too.
you got into the J.K. Rowling topic before you noticed that.
oh, I didn't even notice it then. I was just too interested in what Rick Worley had to say on the topic.
I want to watch that video now. That's just
Yeah.
Hey, maybe
Yeah,
that's potential
curious.
coverage in the future. Who knows?